Welcome, everybody. We'll start with the pledge. Okay. Roll call.
Commissioner Wong. Present. Commissioner Quigg.
Present.
Commissioner Joe.
Present.
Commissioner Fung. Here. And Chair Davis.
Here. Agenda review. Anybody have any questions or changes they'd like to suggest? We're good? Okay. We have no minutes to review. Is this where... Okay. Tonight, if anybody would like the proceedings translated in Mandarin or Cantonese, please raise your hand and let us know. We have the resources here in the room tonight. Okay. We're good. Awesome. Public communication is reserved for anybody who wants to speak on anything that's in the purview of the Planning Commission, but not on tonight's agenda. Does anybody have anything? Any speaker slips? Is it on the agenda, what you want to talk about? No. Okay. Okay, so the first one is Ron Raquel.
Hello, Planning Commission. I had forwarded an email to you that you recently received. It's about the traffic on El Camino and Millbrae Avenue. As I had mentioned in the letter, neither developer has really addressed the impact of this construction that we're going to do. It is vital for our success for the development. I understand that it's our long-term goal to be a vibrant city for all people and to be inclusive. But on the other hand, the quality of life is very important for all residents, and I've yet to see a concrete solution to the traffic problem. As you know, Millbrae Avenue is really a very tenuous situation at best right now, and you are going to be adding at least 800 additional units, potential 400 people driving on Millbrae Avenue with more businesses going on there, and it's really unfathomable that it really has not been addressed by anyone to a significant portion. Right now, Millbrae Avenue has an F rating as it is. What is it going to be once this development is completed? We can't sink any lower as it is. I understand we need progress, but the quality of life is also very vital to the residents of Millbrae. We both the Planning Commission and the City Council have their due diligence of proceeding. This seems like it's been rushed through the process to make sure that you have meet the codes for all the cities that need to have mixed housing done. And it's a quick money grab, as I mentioned. We really need to address the traffic. It's going to be a major MacArthur maze in the making. What's going to happen once this project is done and the planners have been paid off and the quality of life the Millbrae residents will suffer? We're just going to be a MacArthur maze in the making. You're trying to thread a needle already into a small situation right there. I would like to see some, I understand that the development needs to be addressed, the architect and all that, but what about the traffic? El Camino and Millbrae Avenue is going to be horrendous. It is already bad. Have you sat at the traffic light at El Camino, Real, and Millbrae Avenue trying to cross from west to east? It's pretty pathetic as it is. It's a very fast light, and if you scurry up the street to Millbrae Avenue and Magnolia, you can't even make a left-hand turn sometimes, and you're going to add all these additional units, I understand people are going to be using public transportation, but people from my side of this development are going to have to cross El Camino, and it is already pretty bad as it is. And I hope you address the developer on both projects on how to alleviate the problem. This was probably done before your time. It's a boondoggle as it is. And what are we going to do once it's done? Thank you. You're welcome.
Through the chair. Just I wanted to make one quick comment on Mr. Raquel's comments. I did have the opportunity to speak to him at our last Planning Commission meeting, and then subsequently he sent the email, so I have not had an opportunity to respond to him yet in full, but I will. And just for the public record, I did want to note that when these projects were originally going through their entitlement stage, of course, they were subject to the California Environmental Quality Act. The Millbrae Station Area Specific Plan had an environmental impact report prepared for that plan. When the projects came forward, they tiered off of that environmental impact report. There were known traffic impacts that were going to come out of the proposed projects. And then ultimately the city did adopt what is known as a statement of overriding consideration, which essentially gets down to the fact that there was much more greater good and public benefit to come from the projects than some of the impacts that could not be avoided. But I will prepare a much more detailed response from Mr. Raquel in advance of council hearing.
Thank you. Nathan Chan?
Hello, commissioners. I wanted to speak on an important vote that's going to be happening tomorrow at the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors. They're considering a resolution that's been introduced by two of the supervisors to endorse Senate Bill 50, authored by Scott Wiener, that would enhance transit-oriented development. I think that it's in the interest of Millbrae, if the commissioners and everyone watching tonight and in this room were to pass along comments supporting this resolution. I think this is the right thing to do for Millbrae's present, near future, and distant future. Present because a lot of the plans that have been considered by this commission, whether it's the station area specific plan, general plan, or the downtown area plan, are all well within the theme of transit-oriented development. So I think that this bill would complement those efforts, and Millbrae is working towards the similar goals. In terms of the near future, I have several friends, probably at least 5, who have considered moving to Millbrae and really do want to move here because of the proximity to the transit station and their ability to go both north and south from here. But the fact of the matter is, in the station area, there isn't very, very much housing. There's a couple of condo developments and there's a lot of single-family homes, but because the units are so scarce, it's quite a financial stretch for some of these folks who are in their early to mid-careers. I mean, you know, the houses on Broadway are probably over $3 million at least at this point. They're probably even more. I'm basing this off of 2 years ago now. And then distant future. I mean, Millbrae is a very climate change conscientious community. I mean, later this month, the city council is doing a special study session on sea level rise. So I get the sense, and there's a climate action plan in the works. So I get the sense that a lot of the people in this community care about climate change. And the fact of the matter is that the California Air Resources Board has stated very clearly that California is falling behind potentially on its climate goals because there is no emissions reduction coming from transportation, because car use is still going up and up. So the only way that we're going to get around this problem is by discouraging the usage of cars, and the only way to do that is through more transit use, and only transit proximate development will enable that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we're done with the public comment. Old business, we don't have any. Number 7, public hearing. Okay, I got a big paragraph to read here. Millbrae Sarah Station Project. Planning Commission review of a design review permit and master sign program applications to consider design aspects of the Millbrae Sarah Station transit-oriented development project pursuant to Millbrae Municipal Code 1005-2500C. The applicant, Millbrae Sarah Station LLC, obtained approval of a development agreement to develop 3.6-acre mixed-use TOD project in 3 buildings located on the west side of Millbrae Intermodal Station, east of El Camino, consisting of, number 1, Building R1, a 10-story building with 119 apartments, 4,255 square feet of ground floor retail space, 3,648 square feet of retail or live workspace. Number 2, Building R2, 10-story residential building containing 325 apartments, 4,340 square feet of retail or live workspace. And number 3, Building C1, a 9-story building with 290,140 square feet of office space, a 5,000 square foot galleria and lobby, and 22,360 square feet of retail space. Brad, staff report?
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it very much. Welcome. This evening we're here to begin the design review permit public hearing for the Millbrae at Sarah Station project. As you know, this was a project that was approved through a development agreement back in April of 2018, April 24th. And you just read off the components of each of the buildings. We can get into that a little bit further later if necessary. What is before you this evening is actually a design review permit application. So this was noted in their development agreement as one of the subsequent approvals that they needed after the development agreement was approved. And so like many of the design review permits that are before you, whether it be for a single family home or for larger projects, you still have the same purview in this particular case. Specifically in the municipal code, our section 1005-2500C requires design review permit for brand new construction within the city. All projects must meet the requisite findings for approval. And furthermore, for this particular project, we have to find that the project is consistent with the Millbrae Station Area Specific Plan and the design guidelines. Both Planning Commission and Council have the purview to review the applications in relationship to architecture, landscaping, signage, the building materials, colors, the articulation of the buildings, signage. And so with that said, before you this evening again is the Sarah Station project. Again, it consists of the 3 buildings, buildings R1, R2, and C1. This is sort of an aerial perspective drawing that shows the context of the proposed project with the San Francisco International Airport off to the east in the distance, directly adjacent to the Millbrae Intermodal station where BART, Caltrain, Samtrans all come together. And also this project is fronting along Millbrae Avenue and El Camino Real. This is a little bit more of a block form that kind of shows you the siting of the buildings within the city. R1 building is the building that sits directly on the corner of California Drive and El Camino Real. The R2 building and the C1 building, the office buildings, actually sit behind the buildings that front El Camino Real, and you can see them off in the distance here to the east. So this evening, staff is recommending that we open up the public hearing and hear public testimony from staff, from the project applicant, hear public testimony from public comments as well. But we are going to be recommending that we do continue this item to next Monday, to March 18th. And the reason why is this: we've been working for many months now on trying to get this project refined. At this point of the process, what is imperative is that the plans that you act on will end up being the actual plans that would go into submission for the building permit. So it's imperative that we get these plans exact. And so that's what we've been working with the applicant on as late as the mid part of last week. We got the most recent plans. We needed to make a few changes to it. But in the interest of time, we did want to start the public hearing this evening. There has been a lot of conversation about the proposed project through the study session with yourselves, as also with the council, about that relationship between these buildings and the Hemlock neighborhood to the north. So what we wanted to do this evening is show you a number of the refinements and revisions that have occurred to the building, especially as it relates to the Hemlock neighborhood, but as the project as a whole. And hopefully we can just sort of get down to what some of those comments were and some of those issues were, so that coming back next Monday, staff will prepare a full staff report that would have the resolution along with the findings of approval, if you choose to do that, as well as all the conditions of approval that would be required. This was the previous corner design that you saw during the study sessions that went on also to the City Council. A number of comments about this R1 and R2 building in particular was that it looked a little bit too institutional. There were some comments about it having a little bit of a component that looked more like maybe a theater and entertainment sort of building, that it just didn't have enough of a residential feel. And then also with the colors and materials, that they just didn't really relate very well to the single family neighborhood to the north. So with that in mind, the project team set out to take all of those comments in mind and make some refinements. And so here is a new perspective rendering of both R1 and R2 buildings. As you can see, and I can toggle back and forth if you'd like to see some of the comparison. But essentially, the difference between that building and what is proposed before you this evening is a much softer color palette. The introduction of some balconies along the front towards El Camino Real. The overhang, some of the glazing at the top, breaking the building down into a little bit more of a less architectural moves, and I'll let the project architect speak in more depth about that. So again, softening of the color palette, and then looking at making windows that really speak more to a residential building. Staff is supportive of the proposed design in that we do believe it looks much more like a residential building compared to the previous iteration. Here is an elevation from California Avenue that's looking directly to the south. So this, as you can see, the tower element to the right along this area has been enhanced with these balconies here and the glass railings. This area of the building has been opened up for the window pattern that this red signage fin that used to frame the corner has been eliminated, as well as some of the glass box corner element that was there previously. You can see in the middle of the building, now you have a much more sort of refined building that has sort of a ground level, a middle building, and a top to it. The middle being sort of this taupe level design. That's in direct response to comments about the color palette and having a materiality that was much softer to the neighborhood to the north. This is the R2 building, and this is a subject of where balconies were removed, you'll recall. These are the buildings that face directly to property at 500 Hemlock. And so those balconies on floors 6 and lower have been removed. You can see sort of the more of a brick pattern, brick color, I should say, that's been added to the building to kind of soften that elevation as well. This is the building along the Sarah Avenue elevation. And of course, you have all these in your packet as well. Here is the full elevation along Sarah Avenue. That's the back of the building. And then, as you'll recall, there was significant conversation about how that building relates to the Hemlock neighborhood. Here in this drawing, you see where the project site is in blue. And to the north, and the dotted yellow, is the Hemlock neighborhood. Of course, that neighborhood is also split zoned, which is a little bit of an oddity, but there's one component of the block that is zoned commercial. The rest of it is zoned R1 single family. So because the project is at such a scale, 10 stories compared to what's going on with the single-family neighborhood, there have been a lot of concerns from the neighborhood. City staff has been working with the project applicant as well as the neighbors to try to work on helping that transition between the proposed project and the residents. City staff has worked with the applicant and the neighborhoods in all sincerity basically over the last 4 months, trying to get to areas of concern and try to come up with solutions. So some of the concerns have been, and we talked about this during the study session, was a portion of the building that was not compliant with the 45-degree step back as part of the Millbrae Station Area Specific Plan. There were issues about balconies adjacent to the neighborhood, concerns about privacy, noise, visual impacts, smoking, and then also concerns about when the project is under construction, noise, dust, and disruption to the neighborhood in general. With that said, a number of compromises were made with the project applicant. Removed all the north-facing balconies, as I just mentioned earlier, from the 6th floor and lower that are adjacent to the Hemlock neighborhood. And balconies that were on the building have been moved more inward towards the building. In particular, the project applicant has agreed to build a 12-foot high wall along California Drive. Would be planting trees along the wall adjacent to soften that and add landscaping. Has agreed to build a deck and a pergola cover for the property owners at 500 Hemlock. Has agreed to a temporary sound and visual barrier during construction. And then, as I was talking earlier, the color palette of the building has been changed. The design of the corner of the building has been changed. And with that, that is where we stand at this point. This is a drawing here that shows essentially where the balconies have been removed or redesigned. We can get into that if you have more questions about that. Moving on to other components of the proposed design, this is the office building, the south elevation. This is essentially looking from the drop-off area for the BART station. So this is looking northward. Here is the office building. As you may remember, when you come down off of the BART platform, the idea is on the ground level of this building that there would be a galleria, which would double both as common open space as well as retail space within the building. This is a picture of how that space may be designed. It's going to have very tall floor-to-ceiling space, very transparent windows to let a lot of light in there. It would be a gathering space, and it also would be a little bit unique in that it's indoors, so you'd be able to get shelter from some of the inclement weather, especially over the last month. So that's a very, very fast rundown. I know that we're going to have a lot of questions. We have the project applicant here to speak in much more detail about the changes they've made in the process that they've been through. Again, our recommendation this evening is that we open the public hearing. You've heard presentation from me. You can hear from the project applicant, take public comments, and then informally we would recommend that we continue the project to March 18th, which is next Monday. And then again, just to reiterate, we would then be reissuing another staff report with the resolution with full findings and conditions of approval for your consideration, as well as a much more elaborate description of all elements of the proposed project. So with that, I'll go ahead and take any questions if you have them now. Otherwise, we can certainly turn it over to the project applicant for their presentation, and then we can get into questions of the commission. Thank you.
Any questions right now?
I heard numerous requests from the public to have a translator for translation services, and we have a translator here on site today. How are we going to get started with that process before the applicant presents their project?
Right, and so I think that the idea this evening was to have a translation in person with those persons that needed that ability. I did not have the idea that it would be translated over the actual broadcast. If that's something that we would like to do, we can try to make arrangements for that. We can have the translator come sit here at the table and translate directly into the microphone. Otherwise, we can certainly try to work on making sure that this hearing is translated on next Monday when the final findings are made. and certainly moving forward into council, whatever the commission's pleasure is.
I certainly believe that the public is in need of that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have heard those comments. And I think those comments were made to your offices as well. So obviously, we don't want to slow down the meeting. Having the same comment being translated in English as well as in other forms of languages. But why don't you take some time to think about how we can do that on Monday, the next meeting, so that the instant translation can be a reality for those people who are not only here but as well as on TV, so that they could benefit from the meeting as well.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else right now? No? Okay. We'll have the applicant come up.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. This is the full show, which starts with the context and all that. We should probably fairly quickly.
We're actually going to, so following on this presentation, so what I did want to share is just in terms of the Millbrae Station.
Can you come a little closer to the mic, please?
Sorry.
Thank you.
In terms of
Or
the-
grab the handheld if it's over there, if that's easier.
Can you hear me? No? Okay. So in terms of the Millbrae area specific plan context, I think you're all familiar exactly where this is. So anytime you have a question, we can stop and I'll just continue to move forward. These are things we've covered before. So we all know where the site is and its proximity. This drawing actually explains how it's connected to Millbrae. So the red nodes are the major intersections. You can see where California Drive has been realigned in the blue dash line. The yellow dash line is the planned San Francisco Bay multi-use trail. So it's real connectivity into Millbrae and the fabric of Millbrae. The character and identity of the design is one that is a contemporary architecture. The office building uses a curving fluid design of glass and metal to create something that's both striking and modern and that would be appropriate for technology tenants. And that also harkens to both the spirit of aviation in the sense that Millbrae is the front door to the area through the airport in San Francisco Bay Area, and also the kind of curvilinear architecture and form making that exists in the BART station already. Here's the site plan, which just shares how the R1 faces Camino Real. R2 and the commercial office building are on Serra, between the newly realigned California and Serra. And then, of course, there's passages cross-block. And then Linden is the primary address for the new commercial office building. And Brad shared some images of the two-story Galleria there. Here are the open spaces, so you can see the kind of dedicated open plazas that are along the Gateway Plaza along Camino here. The actual passage and alley between the buildings here, the new Galleria, Transit Plaza, and then open spaces on the site. This diagram reflects public circulation across the site. We've actually analyzed all bicycle circulation and where bicycle parking goes as well. This illustrates vehicular circulation and where one would have mobility drops for both taxi and ride hailing. The service docks are located in 3 areas along California. They are tucked under the buildings so that there's the ability to pull off-street, so loading won't have to happen on-street. And there's very detailed signage programs so that one actually can bicycle or walk and not be in interference with these. Service and loading. Here are the measures we've looked at for the cyclist truck conflict avoidance. We have suggested locations for public art, and you can see that they sit at gateway plazas. All of them are visible from the public realm, and they are intended to energize kind of key points of transition within the site. Here as well, and then here inside of the Galleria. These are examples and precedents that we have proposed using across the site. Everything from figural work to water features to dynamic walls and sculpture. If we were a bird and we were above the site looking down, or a plane, this is a roof plan, so you can see actually the green roofs that sit on the buildings. And then, of course, the ground level landscaping surrounding them. The commercial office building employs a kind of geometry and form making to reduce the visual mass of the building by creating two, in effect, caressing arcs in plan. And these arcs step, so they're layered, so they step up, and then the building steps up as well. All of this is done, for one thing, to be in compliance with FAA regulations, and also to break down the visual mass of the building, and to provide a new building length roof terrace overlooking Millbrae and toward the bay and the airport. This is a palette of the materials, so we're using glass walls, metal reveals at the floor, what is called a frit pattern, which is essentially a baked ceramic on the glass so that the glass has a pattern to it. And I can explain that in this slide. So the way that the frit patterns work is they become dense at one end of the building, and then they're going to graduate and they'll open up as they move across, and the layer in front of that will actually flip, so it'll be a denser frit, and then it'll be opening up in the other direction, so that no matter where you are, the building has a dynamic quality and is never just a static thing. It's always shifting and changing as you move around the building. These are the locations proposed for signage. So all of these are working with city ordinance and also the specific plan. Here's a view if we're walking out of the BART station and the Caltrain station. So as Brad said, you can see here how there might be a bicycle kind of cages and racks right here off of the walking out of the escalator coming off of Caltrain and BART. Looking back across Residential 2. This is an earlier rendering of Residential 2, and Bill's going to share with you the current design of it. It's been updated since we've had subsequent city council meetings as well. You can see the layering of the glass on the building here, and the fact that the building is raised, so it's more transparent at the base. This gives you a sense of the scale of the sidewalk. So here's California Drive. So trains, pedestrian access, street sidewalk access, vehicular access, bike lanes, and the public realm along the street. There's a very thorough signage program. So all key points across the building are mapped. So there'll be directional signage using a variety of monument, different types of signs. These are examples of what those might look like. As we're looking at the building, here's a view of the building, in a sense, in the evening and in the daytime. So in both cases, this gallery, the two-story gallery facing Linden and California, will be a kind of new open public room for Millbrae. And you can see here the public art is intended to grace the back wall of that space. This is a view approaching the space. So you can see how it opens up. We'll be using a low iron glass, which is a glass without essentially greatly reduced or nearly eliminated reflectivity so that you can see through it, as opposed to traditional glass on buildings, which uses what's called a low E coating, which reflects the sun and heat gain back. So the space in both the day and evening. This is a view of the roof terrace, and so what that will feel like, you'll see that there's actually a terrace on the roof of the building and then a green roof garden around it. Here are the elevations of the building. So as I said, we've broken this so that these feel like more narrow wings of approximately 60 feet, and they curve and touch at the center point. The long elevations, and you can see in plan the layering of that. So there's a lower level and then a higher level at the back, and you can see that on both sides, and you can see how the building steps up, which is evident here as well. There's signage that actually welcomes you to Millbrae. So these are examples of what that signage is proposed to be. So they're large standing free letters welcoming folks, welcoming everyone to Millbrae. They'll sit on a pedestal. Shown with them are examples of similar types of signage. Again, monument signage that actually has key wayfinding information on it. So it'll be directional signage. So no matter where you are walking around the development, you'll be able to orient yourself as to where you want to go within Millbrae. Building identity signage ranges from everything from standing monument signs outside, the freestanding block letters, to signage which is actually applied to the building. So these are examples of what that will be like. If we're on Sarah and Linden looking back, you'll actually be at the very top of the Galleria. So, the bottom of it is 7 feet lower than the top point. So there's a kind of gentle incline across Linden as it goes down. But you're actually at the level of the public art when you're at the corner of Sarah and Linden. This is a section through that. A view back into the Galleria. An overall perspective, and this is updated showing the new architecture of the residential buildings sitting adjacent to the office building, and Bill's going to present this.
Thank you, Paul. So we'd like to walk you through some of the design evolution of the residential buildings, R1 and R2. Some of the original comments we had when we presented to you and to the City Council over the last several months and to the neighbors has been that it might be too institutional, it was too white. We actually had proposed that it integrate a little bit more with the office building by introducing it as a metal panel facade with mostly a white and gray palette with accent colors. Since we got that feedback, we sort of pulled back from that and started to look at it in something with a material that had a little bit more texture and color. And so we're proposing just for generic layering of words, it's like a terracotta facade, a terracotta rain screen. Now, terracotta can be brick. There also could be some other stone-like materials, but what we're proposing is actually a terracotta material. Let me just pause and I'll bring up the sample. I'm fine. This would be...
Don't fall. Don't fall.
For reference, you can maybe slide. So when I refer to that, I refer to this. So we'll go in a little more detail in that, but I just wanted to bring that up so when we talk about terracotta, you can start to see the color palette and the texture of the material and how it is a much more residential material in this application. So what we did was we looked at the overall building massing and the organization, how it relates to the office building and the composition of space and the creation of the pedestrian zones. But we felt that the materials needed to be adjusted as well as the color. As you start to zone in on some of these areas, what used to be like white metal panel system and gray spandrel glass, we've now sort of transformed it into this terracotta layering of material. Especially along El Camino, you can see how that's quite different than what we had before. So the terracotta material and these sort of terracotta colors help give a much more textured element to the design. And the other thing we've done is we took the opportunity to try to break down the entire residential development so that building R1 has a slight color tone difference than building R2, so that you can get a variety of color as whether in shade or in sun. This is looking at building R2 along Sarah and building R1 in the distance. Again, we still have, this is still a very elegant contemporary building, but it introduces a somewhat traditional material, but in a contemporary way. This is not a brick warehouse type building with punched openings. It's the use of this material in a lighter way. It sort of hangs on the facade. And so when we get into the colored materials, what we looked at is a combination of, let's say, R1, and this is the new corner that Brad talked about. We had comments about the corner being too glassy, too transparent, problems that maybe residents might have of people looking at them in their living room. And so what we did was we turned the corner with a little bit more of a heftier edge on each side of the corner. But the corner still remains transparent because this is a great view to the hills. And so we brought out a balcony at this level, which you see here, to help obscure the view from El Camino into the unit. So the unit glazing is set back like 5 or 6 feet. But at the same time, we felt that we needed to have the top of the building express this sort of gateway character. So with a modest way, we have that Sky Club room that we have always had, being a little bit more glassier. And then the other material, let me just point out this. One of the sort of elements of the design was to break down the building, 10-story building. And what we looked at in this particular diagram is that we have like a base, which has a stronger anchor to the ground with the use of the terracotta material. We have a middle, which is a projected wall. The entire wall now cantilevers out about 5 feet. And then we have a more transparent top. So we have a base, a middle, and a top, and they're integrated. We sort of carry at certain edges, what I call a vertical integration, where we link those two together. If I go back this particular view, one of the other things that was done in response to some of the neighbors' concerns was we eliminated all the balconies. Oh, sorry. And even in this elevation, but we eliminated all the balconies in this zone of the building. So the only balconies that face towards Hemlock are from the 7th level on up, and any balconies that are on the corner are no longer on the corner. They've been moved inboard. So this is a straight-on elevation, and what you'll see in the color palette is we call it terracotta number 1, which is this light terracotta color, and color terracotta number 2, which would be a taupe kind of color, which is in that one basket. So that we wanted to not make it so heavy and strong, but we wanted the texture of a terracotta, but the lightness of more of a contemporary color. And then as you go around this particular building, the R1 that faces Sarah Street is a little bit more glassier because it's sort of relating itself to the office building and the composition along Sarah. Then the part that faces El Camino obviously has this corner glass and balconies, but it also has the strength of some of the terracotta walls coming to the ground and framing the storefronts. And then this is a long elevation, actually, of R2. If you took R1 away, if R1 were built second, if R2 were built first, and you were looking at the entire building of R2 from Sarah or El Camino, you would start to see the patterning of the color and the introduction of that central court and the landscaping that would occur on the balconies and on that roof deck. But this is a view you probably would not see except in a drawing. Same way here, if you took away R1 is partially in front of this portion of R2 where the two buildings come together in that courtyard. And again here, these balconies are pushed back about 100 feet or more, where this corner, the part that steps from California in response to the 45-degree angle. At the 7th floor would be a roof garden. And at these levels, we used to have corner balconies, and those have been eliminated. They've been pushed around the corner about 15 feet back. So there are no balconies facing directly onto the Hemlock neighborhood at those levels. Again, some of the signage concepts that Paul referred to would be applied to the residential buildings. Parking signs as well, to indicate where there would be parking entries as well as loading areas. And then when we get to the street level, I think one of the concerns you had in your previous comments, what does it feel like walking around this project? What does it feel like at the street level? So this is zooming in on the street level at the R1 corner of the Gateway Plaza, where there'd be retail tenants wrapping around the corner at the corner of California, and then as it turns into the small alleyway. It would be a 2-story high expression. And then as you turn the corner, looking at the Gateway Plaza, this draws you back towards the R2 building and another courtyard plaza. But the intent here is to activate this area with color, texture, landscaping, outdoor seating along this particular corner. And the landscaping creates a nice pattern and color that gives them much more warmth to the project. As we approach getting closer, there's also opportunities for public art at the locations that Paul referred to. One would be at the terminus of Sarah, and another one would be further in at the entry courts of the two buildings. Again, retail signage and graphics will also be compatible with the office signage and the residential signage to make this a connected pathfinding development. This is an earlier rendering of the courtyard between the office building and R2. We've since enhanced this with the color palette that I mentioned, and that's before you. But the idea was that we still would get a base along Sarah Street, where we have some work-live units, opportunities. Corner units would have corner balconies, and we would break it with a frame that creates a base, a middle, and then the top would be more transparent, and it integrates down to the street level. This is a further view in between the two. There's a sculpture, water sculpture, acting as sort of a terminus of the space, but also it actually as a cover of the parking ramp that goes into the building at that point. But this is a mid-block passage that leads back to the BART station. And the section at Sarah, you can see this is the Sarah courtyard, this is the live-work unit, and then the sidewalk and the setback of the unit themselves, and then Sarah. And then this is a view looking down Sarah. Again, we wanted to create a characteristic palette of, natural materials, paving, special paving, so that the pedestrian felt as comfortable in the space as would the automobile. And this, again, was an earlier rendering. This is somewhat of an not the same enhancement with the people in cars, but it gives you a sense of the translation to use of the terracotta, and the lighter terracotta color for R1 and the darker terracotta color for R2, and the potential of landscape of the balconies and the roof terraces to soften the facade. Again, these are just a diagram of the building extensions that cantilever the areas of the project where the buildings do cantilever over the property. And this is another view that it sort of reflects the agreement between the residents of Hemlock and the developer, where several items here, the 12-foot high wall, which is actually 12 foot high on the California Street side, but it'd be 15 feet high on the Hemlock side because of the grade change. The planting of tall evergreens to help screen the view, and then the setback at the 7th floor of the R2 building, so it pushes this back further. as well as these balconies, which used to wrap the corner. Now this is enclosed space, and now the balconies only face to the east towards the airport. And the same is true. You can barely see it here, but the same is true of the R1 building. And then the introduction of the terracotta color here, the darker terracotta color, to help give more warmth to the facade. And this is just a blow up to kind of show you the scale and the distance between the neighbors and the buildings. And the R2 building, again, this shows you that section. So here's 500 Hemlock. Here's the sort of grade change between California and 500 Hemlock. And the 12-foot high wall on this side would be a 15-foot high wall on this side, plus the planting of these taller trees. And then, of course, the location, this is actually a cut through where the courtyard exists between R1 and R2, so you start to see that there's a slight rise up about 3 feet to the from the street up to that courtyard. And this is further down California. And these, I think Brad we went through the elevations. We submitted these elevations. The actual color materials, we're referring to the previous color material palette that we showed you, and it's also here. So these are just the full elevations showing the heights of the buildings and how they are sit within the FAA regulations and height patterns that are over the R1 and R2 buildings. And then the site signage, which has been developed both with a signage consultant and with the landscape architects, site furnishings and materials. Again, trying to introduce natural materials, but they're, and also more contemporary use of, trash cans and bike racks and environmental art, environmental furniture. Lighting plan, again, the location of bollard lighting as well as up pedestrian lights located throughout the site for safety and for convenience. And then the landscape architects have come up with a full palette of low water use planting to be used in different zones throughout the site in these different landscape areas. Low water use trees. Also the roof planting will also be drought tolerant, but it'd be at a different scale because of the depth of soil that you would have on a roof deck. And I think that's it for our presentation, and there might be another follow-up. Yeah. So maybe we'll open for questions, and then we could sort of...
Okay. Does anybody have questions for him right now?
The applicant, would you mind stepping up to the mic? Could you address a little bit more about you mentioned some agreement between you and the Hemlock neighborhood in terms of the 45-degree step down. Could you go into that a little bit more, give us a little bit more detail about what the agreement was and what the design is in terms of setbacks? And I see a one-step setback.
Right, yes.
Right, could you go into a little bit more about that? Give us a little bit more detail.
I think Brad will also probably be part of that discussion since he was the one that has been meeting with the neighbors. But essentially, after looking at all of the elements of that part of the building, I'll try to find a better view of that. This kind of shows it. The intent was to respond in many ways to the neighbors' concerns in terms of the balconies was a big issue. So closing off the balconies on those lower floors and at the same time setting the building back one time. We did look at variations. We did follow the 45-degree plane, and I think the diagram was shown to the Planning Commission months ago. We would have this sort of ziggurat, as I call it, a ziggurat step effect, which is not a very architecturally a very pleasing and quality way to introduce a building of that nature. It creates lots of terraces, which need waterproofing. Structurally, you have to step back each time there's a structural penalty. So we felt that in the character or the intent of the setback was to make one strong setback 15 feet back from the facade, and just one time, so that the perspective angle from the ground is almost a 45-degree plane. And I think Brad was, I don't know, Brad, you want to add to the actual other elements of the meeting that took place over the fall and the early part of this year?
Yeah, I can speak to that issue just a bit more. So, as the commission may recall, I think that when this project was going through its entitlement stage, it was recognized that there was a development standard within the Millbrae Station Area Specific Plan that requires a 45-degree angle when it's adjacent to residential neighborhoods. Sort of the intent of what that is about is to try to create a proper transition when you have a residential neighborhood next to the size building. It was determined during the development agreement that the building was not fully compliant with that standard and that needed to be addressed prior to the development review permit. Given that this condition only applies to building R2 and not R1, and that's because of the commercial zoning that is part of the Hemlock neighborhood, you really end up getting this sort of hybrid approach to how you're trying to achieve the intent of what that design was about. So since it really impacted just the half of the neighborhood, the applicant started working with the neighbors to determine other aspects of the building that they could redesign that would, in effect, come up with the same intent, which is try to soften that transition between the neighborhoods. Given that there is, and what we understand, some level of agreement between the neighbors and the developer, the applicant has now proceeded with a specific plan amendment, and that is actually noticed for next Monday, so we can talk about that at that moment in time. But from a design intent perspective, I believe they've done what they are. That they've done enough to get agreement between the neighbors as well as achieve the design intent without being as regimented as what the standard called for. I think the gentleman you just heard from talked about how if there was full compliance with that standard, you'd have this 45-degree terrace-like building. And so I think staff is supportive of the design that's before you. Of course, it would require the specific plan amendment, and we can talk about that at the next hearing.
So what I'm hearing is that, in short, you met with the neighbor, and the neighbors are happy with this design. Is that correct?
Well, I think we're probably gonna hear from some of the neighbors tonight. I think what I have heard is that the notion of happiness as it relates to this development is something that's very difficult to answer, because I think on its face, given that the specific plan authorized buildings at the 10-story mark, that transition has been a difficult thing for the neighbors to work with. It creates such a juxtaposition between the existing neighborhood and what's proposed. That being said, what I understand is that when we're talking about the balconies, the privacy issues, all of that has been agreed to. So I think there is some level of happiness, if you will, with the changes that have been made to the building, such that there is a compromise that's been reached between the developer as well as the neighbors. And with that agreement in place, then the issue is whether or not the specific plan amendment can be addressed.
Instead of using the word happy, so this is an agreement between the neighbor and the developer? What we see is in terms of the design being proposed?
Yes.
Okay. And that still does not meet the current MSASP, which would, if this were to be approved, it requires an MSASP amendment.
That is correct.
That's what I'm hearing. I see. Okay.
More questions now? Yes? Okay. Or do you want to wait till after we hear from the public?
Yeah, I guess just clarification from staff for the, in the packet item, or page 4, there's a figure that talks about connecting Millbrae, and it talks about traffic and bike lanes and improvements to intersections. But just to clarify, for our review and for the purposes of this design review, we're only limited to comments on the property. Is that correct? We're not talking about improvements, because I'd love to comment on like the BART station plans and California Drive and intersections, but for this purposes.
Yeah, and I realize how tempting that would be. We're talking about city planning here. So, but for the purposes of what we're here this evening to discuss, and certainly next Monday, is that, again, this is a design review permit, and so it's limited to the building elevations, the colors, the materials, the landscaping, the signage.
Okay, so I have 2 maybe speaker slips. If anybody else has them, can you bring them forward, please?
Madam Chair, before we start, I just wanted to add 2 things. The type of decision that you have here is one that will require you to disclose any meetings or conversations you've had. I think it might be easier if we did that at the next meeting.
Okay.
And so just give you a little time to prepare a little summary of who you've met with, both in favor and opposed to the project. And so when we open the hearing at the next meeting, I would ask you all to be ready to disclose just what those meetings are. Just the nature of this particular design permit is such that we need to do that.
Okay, thank you.
One other comment I would just mention. I'm sure we'll hear from the neighborhood in terms of their relative degree of satisfaction with the project. I think at the council meeting, there was a little bristling at the word happy. I think it's acceptance. I think there's no, and just to answer Commissioner Fung's question, there's no legal agreement. There's basically been the developer has agreed to a series of changes to the project, and I believe the neighbors are accepting of those, but I'll certainly let them express themselves. Just want to make sure that was clear.
Perfect, thank you. Okay. First up is Millie Coogan.
Hi there, Millie Coogan, Millbrae resident. I'm guessing by now everybody here knows how strongly I feel like we need as much housing as possible, and I want to thank everybody who's worked on getting it to this point. My son Bert, who was a little too disruptive for this today, is going to be 2 tomorrow, and I know that this has dragged on for a long time for many of everyone here, and we all want a wonderful looking building, but we also we need to get things built. And I think that it will look so much more home-like once there are people living in it, because people living their lives have a way of making things feel like home. And then what was the other comment is that I do think that this step back design that they're showing now looks a lot nicer than the one with all the different setbacks that was more directly. But anyway, I don't want to take any more time, but just, thank everybody for trying to bring this to fruition and including as much housing as we can. Thanks.
Thank you. Christina Ducote.
Good evening. My name is Christina Ducote. I live at 500 Hemlock. My property line is adjacent to Sarah Station. I have brought forth several design concerns on this project, and the city has received numerous letters objecting to the design. Specifically, the project does not meet the 45-degree setback, and that's to my property. And it had balconies facing Hemlock that create substantial negative impacts to our neighborhood. The challenge is a massive high-rise building development with a design that has been so contradictory to the character of Millbrae that it can't meet the design criteria. And that's fundamentally been the problem that we're all trying to solve. I reviewed the current design, There is satisfaction to a certain degree with our neighborhood. Some good progress has been made, and I'm thankful to the applicant for making those changes. With regards to the balconies, there are still a handful of balconies on the side of one of the buildings that are on floors 1 through 6 that still peer into our neighborhood. And so we would like to ask that the applicant consider eliminating those. We have been so clear from day one that balconies into our neighborhood could and should be eliminated. They're not required for marketing, although I know that's a great argument by the applicant. They're not going to take away from his success of the project. So that's just really important to us, and we can point those locations out to city staff or to you folks at any time. A second, in this design, the buffer wall that we had presented as a concept is absent from the drawings. I think that's just a slight oversight. There's a retaining wall called out, but the buffer wall, other than in a picture concept, is not identified on any of the site plans. And city staff, as I understand it, is going to be working with the applicant to get that corrected. That's number 2. With regards to my property specifically, we are working on a plan for mitigation and remediation. What we've really understood through this process is that there is a potential for a ton of construction and actually destruction to our property when the construction wall goes up. I think I'm going to run out of time. Anyway, so that is something that we really need to have looked at. We're going to lose a fence, trees, shrubs, irrigation, concrete, and possibly 10 feet into our property. And that has not been vetted yet, and we want it to be vetted. In short, all of the things that we are asking for are not going to take away from some jobs that this project is delivering. It's not going to take away from housing units. It's simply going to obligate the developer to have some mitigation and remediation as part of his permit. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Cote.
Okay, so good evening. I'm not going to try to repeat anything that Christina said. I think I just want to make one clarification comment. The stuff that we're talking about at the very end there is the fencing has to come down in order to put the buffer wall and the retaining wall up. We have a lot of trees, landscaping, irrigation. There's actual astroturf. There's the synthetic turf in the back that's going to have to be moved. And we've been working with city staff to get that identified as they put the buffer wall up and the sound protection that gets put back as part of condition, because there's a shed that's got to go and a bunch of other stuff because they're projecting about a 10-foot incursion into the property line in order to build the wall that's going to go up. So that was what she was referring to. And so that needs to be, make sure it's captured. Be very clear. From day one, we've been supportive of development. This has never been an NB issue, okay? This has been a what can we do as the applicant builds his entitlement, that we get some protections into the neighborhood and some mitigations. This is the 45 degrees that we've worked out with the applicant, and this is the actual removal of the balconies and the trees and the wall. There is satisfaction with the verbal agreements that have come forward. Again, city staff has been formalizing this and has a document they're preparing in order to condition these things. And that's important that you have before you move this to council, that these conditions are fully captured, that where we are now has been agreed to. But again, it's all verbal at this point, and city staff is working on that. So I think you should understand that. In regards to the compliance issues, again, you're going to have an amendment, but the neighborhood is satisfied that the setback, though it's not at 45 degrees in that picture, is close enough with the mitigations of the wall, the landscaping, the pergola, the balconies, et cetera, removed. That's acceptable to us. The significant visual impact, we appreciate the fact that the balconies have been coming off, that face directly in, realizing that floor 7 and above, they're back on, but we're fine with that. Again, that was a compromise, and we appreciated the applicant coming to the table and agreeing to do that. The balconies Christina is referring to in her previous comments are on the interior corridor on the first set of wing walls. They have direct lines of sight in on the first 6 floors. We'd like to have those removed if at all possible. It's a request from us at this point. Again, to kind of wrap it up, we are good with the verbals. We're almost there with the written, and I know Brad knows very much what we're speaking to in terms of the documentation that's coming forward. We ask that you make sure these conditions are upheld. The neighbors have worked hard. The applicant has worked hard. The redesign is much better than the first set of drawings that came through. Once we get there, I think we'll be a lot closer to having a project that we can all be proud of, both as a city and as a community. And finally, again, in terms of your actual pieces you're DRing here, your design reviewing. Okay, significant visual impact. It is a significant impact to the neighborhood, and there's been a lot of work done on both sides to mitigate that to a level. Again, if the mitigations are upheld, it's all good. The compliance piece, you are going to need to probably modify that plan. But that said, the neighborhood has agreed, and my property in particular has agreed that with the mitigations as stated, we would be okay with the violation of the 45, because it's not quite 45. But I leave that to you fine folks to figure out how you want to deal with that. And I'm out of time. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Constancio Rodriguez.
Good evening. No need to repeat the issues that some of my neighbors actually in Hemlock have still open. So I'd just like to comment on what I've seen in the presentation that was shown today. I'd just like to thank the applicant, the developer, the architectural firm, staff, the council members, and my neighbors that at least at this point in time, after all the subsequent battles and meetings and feedbacks, that what we have today as far as the residential portion of the project, which was originally very problematic to us living in Hemlock, is now looking a lot better and headed in the right direction. It's not only looking a lot better than the original design, but even the design itself is a lot better material-wise and look-wise compared to the original design. And the only thing I noticed in the presentation was in the old design, there was a signage of the Sarah station that's like letter blocking from one of the wingtips that has Sarah station going down. And it was eliminated and now replaced with a signage that had Sarah on one corner and station on one corner, which I don't know about others, but personally, when I saw this, I kind of found it a little weird design-wise, because unlike one of the samples here, wherein it's not a road and more of a pathway, you can kind of get away with having something like that. But in El Camino, if you're heading south, what you see in the current design would be Sarah on one corner, and until you pass the building, you'll just get to see station on the other. And if you're coming from El Camino heading north, all you see is a station at the very corner of the building. My suggestion is, can we place Sarah station somewhere, if we decide to put it in El Camino, towards the El Camino side, to put it somewhere in that building where it's visible, Sarah station? The only thing I notice is there's trees on the sidewalk, so it might get covered. So I'm not sure if it was from the original design wherein it's in the wing, if that was mandated to be removed there and put to the canopy below. But that's the only thing I noticed that maybe we could look into it further. Thank you.
Thank you. Marge Colapietro.
Good evening. I want to begin with a comment about when I was looking through and printing the plans that we have for the visuals for tonight's meeting. I was very, very impressed with the generosity of the developer and his crew for making very specific efforts to for the satisfaction of the neighborhood. And I was also happy to hear from the neighbors that they've gotten closer and closer, and that, you know, everybody's been working together. It truly is a beautiful, beautiful project. I was just awestruck today. And the concessions speak well of how we are a community and how we care for each other. There's still probably going to be some more little things that are going to come up, but I'm sure that we can put our trust in our staff and in our planning commissioners to recognize all that all sides do. And our staff has been working very, very diligently, and I think they're one of the finest staff groups that we've had in our community in many years, not disregarding who has been in that community development department before, but these are, from what I can tell, very, very well educated and knowledgeable people, and have come to wrap themselves as part of the community. I would like to ask you also if you're going to talk about any specific pages that you have, if you could tell us what your page you're on when you speak so we could follow you. I know sometimes the screens, you can't see the pages, and whoever got that screen gets a great big gold star. That's just excellent. And then the other thing I wanted to refer to is page 49, if I may, which is the R1, the R2 building address signage. And when I was looking at this, the first thing, if you look on the left side of the page where it has an MAG in white and a gobbledygook underneath it, I can't even figure out what in the heck that is. I hope that's not something intentional and maybe there was some problem with ink. The middle one that you have to turn your head, 49, please.
49, okay.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
Yeah, this thing over here. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so, and the one to the right of that in the middle, where you have to turn your head and stretch and read that it says the Emerson, I would basically ask for signage that you do not use things that are upside down and sideways. That, you know, it's a big distraction to pedestrians and to people driving in their vehicles if they can't look at something and make it out, like the signage here that's the magpie or something, whatever it happens to say, that you take care of that, because any distraction with a pedestrian is a safety hazard. Any distraction from someone riding in a vehicle to have to turn around or slow down or move their head and body around is a public safety hazard. So I just wanted to make those comments, and thank you so much for the time to say that.
Thank you. John Chang?
Good evening, Planning Commission. Thank you to giving me this opportunity to talk. And I would like to suggest something is regarding the design. Because since the Millbrae, the population is about if you go to Google, the Millbrae population, 48% is Asian, 14% is Hispanic, 33% is white, and the rest are about less than 10%. So I would like to say that have a suggestion. If the building can reflect the population of Millbrae and the history of Millbrae, like Sanchez family and Darius Ogden Mills, because when passengers get off the bar, and their first impression is that TOD1 and TOD2, and if they the building color can reflect the population, I think that would be excellent. And another thing is that when I look at the famous hotels like Hyatt, Marriott, Crown Plaza, their rooftops or even Red Roof, the hotel, their rooftop has significant represent their hotel. So if the rooftop of this D1, TOD2 can represent Millbrae, I think that's excellent. Like using the ceramic or some color to represent the Millbrae, I think that's a best. And another thing is that I saw that terracotta, the color, some of the area very dark, especially around California Drive Avenue. That area, I think, it is less traffic, and at night probably can attract some crime or something. And then I hope the color can be bright during the day, and on the night can have a more glassy and lightening to match that bus station at night. Because bus station at night is very bright. They have that yellow and gold color. I think it's good. It represents California, Golden State. But nowadays, Millbrae, Broadway, El Camino, they have tree lights, very bright. But between bus station and the street, Broadway, it's all dark, mostly dark. If this TOD1 and TOD2 can connect these two areas, I think it is good for Millbrae's business. That's what I'm saying. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Laura Canna?
Hi, my name is Laura Cannon. I'm the homeowner of 510 Hemlock Avenue. And I just really wanted to punctuate a few points that have been made this evening. The first and foremost is that the neighborhood of Hemlock has never been against development in the city. We all are professionals and understand that economic benefit is important for us and for our children. As a neighborhood, and I'm sure the applicant would agree, we've all been in a very painful, arduous jog through cement towards compromise. Very arduous. And we are close. We're becoming closer. As clarified by the city general counsel, we don't have a formal, written, signed agreement. We have a verbal understanding. And what we encourage you to do, which we know you're so well equipped to do, is to please ensure that the agreement is in writing, that it's unambiguous, that there are no loopholes for misunderstanding, and to ensure that what is agreed to actually is taken under consideration before the design is approved. At the end of the day, the reason that our journey has been what it is because we passionately care about our quality of life, the quality of privacy, and we, within Hemlock, will live 24 hours a day with what we're sure will be a lovely building. But at the end of the day, it's our daily lives that sit next to the building. And so we ask that you, with the great wisdom from the city staff, document as accurately as possible the agreement so that there are no changes down the road or misunderstanding or ambiguity. Because we've gotten to where we've gotten after innumerable hours because we are looking at it in great, passionate detail, so it's something that we all can live with as a neighborhood and as a town. So please get it in writing. Make sure there's no ambiguity. If there's an amendment to the plan around 45 degrees, make sure that boundaries are quantified and qualified to the inch, please. and then we all welcome the development when it arrives. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any more. Anybody else? Okay, we'll finish it for tonight, but of course we'll have more next week. All right. Okay. Questions? Discussion? Does the applicant want to respond to anything they heard in particular, or wait for questions?
I would like to see the documentation too. I believe we do have. I believe we've got an agreement with what has been asked of us. The one new issue that's come up is with the balconies that are on the side of the building, and I really don't want to give them up. We have built a wall. We'll put a wall so that the people can't look directly into Hemlock, and that's, if it's not shown on the drawings, it should be shown on the drawings, and it should be part of the approval process. But these balconies look into the courtyard of the project. In other words, it's not looking that they're not intended to look down Hemlock. I can't stop someone from hanging over the balcony and turning their head, but it's not a convenient look down the street. So we have, we've included, even though we're only required really to look at what our R2 building was, we've taken the balconies off on the same 4 or 5 levels on the R1 building, which is not was not covered by the commercial issue, to try to satisfy the neighborhood. I believe we've satisfied a large number of the neighbors, and I hope that we can get through this one issue. And again, I agree with documenting this thing. I don't want to have any issues with my neighbors. I want to have a very clear understanding of what we're doing and what they're going to get. I don't want any ambiguity. So, and I think you've got a staff that can draw it up that way. So we'll see what they do. I haven't seen it yet, so I just have to wait.
Thank you. Okay.
May I ask a follow-up just to that? So I just wanted to be clear on which one. It's on the R1 building. Can we just kind of pull that up so it's page 61? And just so that we're all clear on what the balconies in question are. It's called R102, right. So so the one that's in question is the R1, which is the farther building, right? I mean, sorry, the R1. Okay, if you can find, because I was skimming, I saw it. Okay, yeah. I saw it earlier. I'm just trying to flip through.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Hold this up.
And can you say which pages you're on? So, please.
If you look at the white, if you look at where the purple and the red.
I'm sorry. So we don't have this? Is
this page in our packet?
It's in the staff report.
It's in the staff report.
I'm sorry. This is part of my PowerPoint presentation, which is not in front of you. It's there on the screen.
Okay, got it.
So the best thing that we're going to be able to do is to orient you from the actual plans that you do have in front of you so we can be clear. I think maybe one of the best sheets to look at would be either sheet 6 or 6 probably is the best.
I think this diagram does explain it very well in that you can see the shading of the 500 Hemlock and 503 Hemlock, Hemlock Avenue. The first thing was these red color, these were balconies that faced directly into the Hemlock homes. Those have been closed off, and those units have a balcony. This is a balcony facing towards the airport. So you would have to have a periscope or some other device in order to see Hemlock. This other balcony faces the courtyard. It was here. It's been moved inward about 15 feet. So it also cannot even physically see 500 Hemlock, and someone would have to strain to see past this corner to 503 Hemlock. On the R1 building, all of these balconies, all the way down the line, have been removed at levels. There are no balconies on level 1 and 2. There never were. So they've been removed from levels 3 to 6. So 4 floors of balconies have been removed along this California Drive along here. This unit had a corner balcony because there was a living room on the corner with great views to San Francisco and the airport. So that was eliminated. This has been filled in, and the balcony has at one time turned a corner and stopped here. Now there's no balcony except right here. And I guess this might be the area that might be in question where someone could strain and get a diagonal view, but you're about 80 to 90 feet away, and you're up 20 to 60 feet. So that's our feeling that it's not significant. No one, you'd have to go out of your way to really want to peer into someone's yard that high up, that far away. And the rest of the balconies all look inward to courtyards, just like these look inward to courtyards, and with a wall that baffles them, their focus is the courtyard, not Hemlock. So I think that's the current layering of the design that you can see.
Okay, so we're not seeing that on here. That's why. So the purple wraparound is now gone.
It's gone.
And then the balcony is actually moved over closer inside.
Dotted lines. So
internally.
The purple and the red are all gone. There are no balconies in those areas. There are only balconies here where the dotted dash line is, and here. And then as we move around the building, the others that face inward.
Okay, and are those recessed balconies, or are they actually jutting out?
Well, they're recessed because the physical wall of the building is here, and these push in.
Okay, thank you.
And they're 5-foot deep balconies so that they can be used.
It's my understanding that the 45-degree setback requirement calls for a little bit more setback on the upper story than you currently propose. I remember some months ago that we used to have a sort of a diagram that shows a red line that draws out that 45-degree angle and call out which portion of it is in excess of that 45-degree angle. Do we have that relative in compliance, documented on anywhere in here so that we can see, how much of it that it's outside of that 45-degree angle line requirement?
That was in a previous package that was both viewed, I think, previously with you and then with the city council. But once this agreement came about, that's sort of, I wouldn't say a moot point, but the idea was that this did satisfy the intent of the setback, but in a much more reasonable and sensible way than the wedding cake stepping. There is a diagram in the records from previous meetings, so I don't know if we want to try to find that or present it next week. So, but I don't think it's a question anymore. I
think what he means is, can we see that line against the new design, just to see where it does squeak out outside that plane, and it can be in next week's drawings. That can be part of the packet.
The line hasn't. I mean, we haven't changed.
We know the line hasn't
at all.
changed, but the building changed.
No, the building has not changed. The only thing that's happened is there were balconies. There are no balconies on the first, fourth, fifth, and sixth floor. We can present you the same drawing to show you the line, but the building as it was then, it is now.
We mean the diagram that shows the 45-degree plane against a building. We had it against a stair-stepping building. Yeah. We just want to see that red line against the design right now with the single step.
Staff has it. It's just a question of adding it back to the drawing.
We'll produce that for the next week's hearing. Yes. One thing to be clear on is that the architecture did change because the building was fully 10 floors, and it has pushed back. So there's a significant step in the mass of the building from when you first saw it.
Mm-hmm. So
that's a change. Yeah. No, the first time they saw it, it was fully. Yeah. We have had a change since they've seen it.
And all we're asking is just to see that line against whatever the current design is, just to see it as an illustration for the next week's packet would be fantastic.
We'll come prepared with that.
Right. The reason asking for that, because it's certainly not a moot point at the moment, because they are in fact not in compliance with the MSASP, and you are asking us to amend the MSASP so that it is in compliance in the future. Right. So that we know exactly what we're granting here.
Through the chair.
Sure.
One other point I wanted to make, too, is that also through the, and they've been talking a lot about it, but also through the council, there was a request that there was a peer review that was done on the actual design itself. And so they did engage in a peer review. And so I did want to make that known to the commission so that it wasn't just them, just receiving comments and then responding, but receiving the comments, responding, and then also having their proposed design then peer reviewed again, which had more impact onto the design as well. I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you. Questions?
Just legally, so for next week, so we will be getting a picture of the 45-degree angle, the amendment to the MSASP, and also the formal agreement with the neighbors. Is that something that's going to happen at the same time, or?
You're going to get conditions of approval that will impose those conditions on the applicant to make sure that the neighbors' concerns are addressed. So it's not a formal legal agreement with the neighbors. Okay. It's that in the
conditions
and in the conditions that you're going to place on the project, those restrictions will be included.
In the conditions of approval. Okay.
And then I would just add too, that those will be performance based, right? So we'll have to determine at what point each of the conditions kick in, but we will have leverage points. For instance, you may have a condition that says that prior to issuance to any building permit, X, Y, and Z would have to occur. And so we'll look at the staging of those, how those conditions will occur. But they will be, as the city attorney mentioned, they'll be memorialized within the conditions of approval. And then, Commissioner Joe, one of the questions you had is that a separate item that has been noticed for next Monday is the prospect of a specific plan amendment. You'll have a separate report and resolution on that matter.
Okay, so one of the conditions of approval for the design review would be the amendment of the MSASP, I'm assuming. So, okay.
Through the chair, just one other. So that change to the specific plan needs to go to the council. They have the final decision on that. So you're going to be making a recommendation on that specific plan change. And then, so your approval of the project would be conditioned on the council adopting that change. Otherwise, the project would need to come back because it wouldn't be in compliance with the specific plan. So, but that will work, but just wanted to explain how that'll go. So your approval will be conditioned on the council adopting the change to the specific plan because the project you're approving will essentially violate the 45-degree setback. But you'll condition that your approval isn't going to be operative until that amendment to the specific plan is adopted.
Okay, and just one more question then procedurally. So, because I know the City Council does want to review as well, so we are, if we do any kind of, we do actually an approval, or do we do a recommendation for approval, or how does that?
Review, you do an approval. Okay. That's how the municipal code reads. On the specific plan, it's really state law. You make a recommendation, and the council then changes the specific plan. So it's really their power to change it.
Okay, and then council will also be commenting on the design review, I'm assuming.
They have indicated through their ability through the municipal code that they have the right to call up. It's not really an appeal, but they have the right to pull up for review, and they have indicated on both the TOD1 and TOD2 they're going to exercise that right. And so, but we do need to kind of follow the rules. Mm-hmm. Your action is an approval of the design review. Then the council is going to pull that up for their review of it. So they'll be making the same, basically the same thing you're doing.
Okay, thank you.
So assuming that we will make some sort of a recommendation to the council on changes on the MSASP, they may or may not adopt the recommendation as proposed. They may make changes to it. They may reject it. And if they were to make changes to it, along with the design review that they will do on top of what we do, right, would that still come back to us?
No.
No, so they would just approve it. They'll be in their hands. Okay.
Yes?
The only comment that I wanted to make was that we heard Mrs. Ducote that she wanted to make sure that everything was put together back in her yard, and I would feel that that is something that the applicant would do. I don't think that that should be a concern because when they're building this wall, I would think that if they have to break something out on her side, that that would be repaired.
I understand that a lot of what is going to be done on the Dakota's property has to be done by the Dakotas. We will pay for it.
Okay.
Okay, but mechanic lien laws and other issues come into play when you try to do things on other people's property. And so, what I'm hoping staff does is make clear, that we're responsible for paying the bill. Okay. But they have to be the ones who contract with the party to do the work, and we'll pay the bill.
Thank you. What I think I'm hearing him say is that he can only work on his side of the property that he owns. Anything that happens on your property, he would pay for. But it's up to you to get the work done. Is that correct? But as far as you are concerned, you're going to get your property back the way it is now. So if there's no other questions, I make a motion that we continue this public hearing to Monday night, date specific, Monday night. God, what month are we in? March. March the 18th.
Well, I don't think we're done with questions. I think
sorry.
Yeah,
so,
sorry.
but we can just hold that out there. It can hang for a little while.
Can I request?
Yeah. Commissioner Wong, does he have anything?
Would you like to start, Commissioner Wong? Or you don't have to? No. Okay. We'll go at this end then.
Okay. A quick question, just to make clear. I know it was addressed. I think Mr. Raquel mentioned about the transportation, and I just want to make clear. So we have an ATP, an active transportation plan, that is being worked on as well, right? So I think that's important to note that there is, because transportation is such a big piece, that is a separate piece that will be addressed and we'll be looking at. Do we have a timeline for? I think we did, but I remember seeing something, but it just would be good to know.
Right. So at this point now, the active transportation plan, along with the general plan and the El Camino Real specific plan and the downtown plan, are all kind of going on simultaneously, as well as the climate action plan. So the idea is that we're hoping to have those documents before council by the end of this year.
Okay. So definitely hopefully well before the developments are done. So it would help. Hopefully. Okay, I had let me see. Question about just the layout of the R2 building. So when you see the floor plan on, say, page 6, it looks like there's an inner courtyard. Page 6. Ground floor plan. or any of those. Yeah. So it looks like for R2, there's a courtyard right in the middle there. So that's on the ground floor. Is that?
That's a internal courtyard that's for the residents of the buildings.
Okay. So then when you go to, say, 39, page 39. There, that you can go back one more. Back one. It looks almost like there's a green right in the middle. That looks almost like it's roof. It's on top.
Yes. No, this is the roof in front of these units. There are some units along here for 4 floors, and that's a green roof on top of those. What you can't see is the actual courtyard at the ground level,
Okay.
which is.
So I just wanted to clarify that was the understanding. So there is a rooftop and then there is also in the middle, in the center, there's going to be a courtyard as well.
Yeah, I think we had a roof plan that showed both of those in here.
Yeah, it's just that because it's not.
Yeah, so this is a roof plan. So this is the green roof of the units that bridge across, and then this is the landscape of the courtyard within the R2 building.
Okay.
And same way, R1 has a landscape roof, and then it has a courtyard that connects it to the R2 building and fronts the Sarah area. And same way with C1 has a landscape roof.
And who has access to the rooftop, that
The residents, yes.
Okay, the residents of just that area. How about C1, the rooftop, is that something that's, who has access to the C1?
I think the intent is for the office workers. It could
Just
be
the office workers, so nobody else. Okay. And then the Galleria inside. Page 6. Okay, that's fine where you're at. So there's the Galleria on the C1 building to the right, and then right behind it toward in the total center of the building, going left, right, that exact center, what is that?
That's the building core, the elevators, toilets, fire stairs.
Elevators going up and down, and then around it is retail.
Retail and potential office.
Okay, and there's nothing in back.
That's all.
There's no access to it. Okay.
It's potentially, it's office, it's commercial space. So it's retail on the Galleria is dedicated retail, and then the rest of the floor is zone commercial, which could either be a complete retail function if that's what the developers decided to lease it out for, but it's commercial space. The only thing that isn't commercial is this area right here, and this is the loading dock, mechanical rooms, and everything else right here.
Okay, so if people in the offices, how do they go up the building? Where's the access to the door? They go through the Galleria?
They would basically go through here. All of this opens into this.
And all of that is open?
I'm sorry, how would they come in again?
So here's the Galleria. What is the question? I'm not quite sure I understand.
So because you're saying the center is the core, the elevators. So how would office workers, do they go through the Galleria? Do they go through
to get to their
doors?
space?
Right.
Yeah, they come through the Galleria. Here's the reception desk, and here's the elevator core. So they would either go into their space, or they would go up in the elevator core to an upper floor.
Okay, and so is there a hallway around the core?
Well, it's an open floor plan, so there's no tenant floor plan yet. So it would depend upon if this is multi-tenanted or single-tenanted. If there's multi-tenant, there would be a corridor around here, so multi-tenants would open onto it. But if it's a single tenant, you might just come into a single space, and it's all open. It depends upon how the tenant wants.
That would be okay. I mean, I was just kind of thinking through the Galleria, and that because it might be interesting to have like a throughway into the building towards Sarah, so that's why I wasn't sure if that makes sense from where the Galleria is and going across.
So I'm not quite sure I still understand the question when you say a thoroughfare.
Like a thoroughfare. So I'm sorry. Yeah, thoroughfare. Where so like somebody entering in, say it's raining a lot and people want to be able to kind of walk through, so they would have the Galleria.
That is
and they
the
could actually walk
Galleria.
through. Right.
Galleria. Yeah.
So the gallery walks through this. Looking at the plan, it goes from top to bottom. But I'm saying left, right to left.
Well,
Is there
that is
anything like
actually
that?
that's the dedicated office space. So that's not a public thoroughfare. It's really the public thoroughfare and public realm is this 2-story space, which is the Galleria, and in the middle of and there's retail flanking it on the north and south, the right and left, and in the center is the reception and lobby that you would move into for the office building. And once you move in there, which is a secure zone, you can go into the floor plate or up into the building.
Okay.
So the Galleria is the primary entrance for the entire office building.
What you maybe don't see is that there's an elevation difference. Okay, it's 7 feet from Sarah Avenue to New California Drive. There's a drop of 7 feet. What happens is the Galleria takes care of it because there's either escalator or stairs that take you up
in the middle of it.
to Sarah. But as you go into the building, you have a wall of a 7-foot wall on one side. On the other side, it's glazed, looking out onto California. So you really can't, I mean, creating a corridor that goes anywhere else goes into a wall unless you create another set of staircases and escalators.
Okay.
Okay? And the wall that's on the northern end of the office building on the first floor abuts the entryway to the driveway into the garage. Okay. So you couldn't really get out that way. I mean, it just doesn't lay out because of elevation. It's an elevation issue.
Okay, thank you.
So what I'm hearing is the Galleria really functions as the giant lobby for the office building.
The lobby is off of the Galleria.
5,000 square feet of lobby.
Yeah, but the reception for the office building, so let's just walk through this so everyone understands. This is the Galleria, and this is a space that's going to be open to the public during the same hours as the BART is operational. That's what we discussed, correct? So from dawn till really the end of evening. So if you're coming or going to Caltrain or BART, this is an area that will be publicly accessible to you, so you can go in here. Off of it is basically the lobby and reception for the office building. On either side is flanked by retail, which will be dedicated commercial space. And then the entire floor plate behind here is a commercial level, right? And that can either be rented to office workers or, if it was what the developer chose to do, this entire thing could be a commercial use opening to the Galleria. It's really dependent upon how it ends up being let. But programmatically, publicly accessible, this is the core which supports the building, retail on either side, and then the lobby for the office building really right here in the reception.
So I'd like to get into the traffic and circulation plan and the pedestrian and the biking plan a little bit, just to staying on that same figure there. It's fine. So it appears that the main thoroughfare for cars parking would be behind on California Drive, and then the main entrance for both the drop-off for the commercial building and the residential building would be on Sarah Avenue, for example, for Ubers, Lyfts, etc. Yeah. So going back to that other...
That's here, Commissioner Wong.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can see where this is vehicular access here to get into the subterranean parking structure. These are loading docks. And this is for rideshare or taxis.
Right. So for the Sarah Avenue, if that's the main drop-off area, I know that the circulation for that, is that going to be a one-way street or is
yes.
Two-way? It's a one-way street. And then that there's a kind of a really tiny alleyway next to the auto shop there where Sarah Avenue would pass through there.
Sarah will return here and open back to Camino.
Right. Is that, I know it's an alleyway and there's business with auto shops and garages there. Is that really, is there planned improvements for that in the future from city staff? Or who's responsible for that? Because I don't see it really being a good thoroughfare that is really accessible or meant to handle traffic drop-offs, a major dropping area off for the entire 3 buildings, and then they're all passing through the little tiny alleyway to exit.
Yeah, I think we started out talking about what the nature of this hearing's about, the circulation and the service and loading. That's all been somewhat vetted through the development agreement itself. But I do hear you about how the future of the properties in front of Sarah Avenue, about how they develop and how that's all going to accommodate that. And so perhaps under a redevelopment scenario, there would be an opportunity to take a look at that again. But at this point, this is the circulation pattern that was approved pursuant to the development agreement.
Because I can see an alternative might be to have a roundabout at the very end so people just go in, turn around, and just drive back out that way if it's wide enough to accommodate that.
It's not really wide enough to accommodate a roundabout, but the way the area plan was designed was to keep the current thoroughfare intact as a kind of secondary vehicular and pedestrian and bicycle passage through the community. So that's what we're really doing is we're adhering exactly to the area plan.
So who's responsible? Is the city responsible for the improvements for that street, the alleyways? And I'm concerned about the California Drive also, talking about the same circulation plan. Like the drawings have on the Caltrain parking area there. On this figure here, it shows that there's like a 2-way going into that Caltrain drop-off area, but in actuality, it's only one way, I believe. So who's responsible for all these improvements, and will they be completed in time?
You're talking about up here. This is the responsibility of the city.
The responsibility of the city is to get us the access. We have the responsibility to build it.
Not on the other side of the property line.
Yeah, no, we do. That's the deal that we struck with them, is that we would do we would.
Microphone. Make sure you got it close to you.
My understanding is that we provided the access all along here, up to this point, up to the edge of our property. Okay. Beyond that, the city has to work it out with Caltrain, with BART, and with whomever. Otherwise,
Hence, he's asking if you're going to do that beyond there.
Yeah, we would be building that.
Stay with the microphone, please. Sorry.
We would be building. I mean, that my understanding is we've committed to build that if it's available to be built. Otherwise, if it's not during the period of our construction, we're not going to go back and build it. That's always been part of the plan. We can't build on land that we don't own, and we can't build on land that the city doesn't have available for us to do the improvement. We've offered to do the improvement, but understand we are expecting to be reimbursed our pro rata share of that through the other properties in the Site 1 development area as they come on. And that's an ordinance that the city attorney still has to draft that will provide for our getting back our costs as these other properties develop, because they all benefit from the California Drive access, okay, and the removal of traffic. I mean, one of the traffic problems that was alluded to earlier tonight, the California Drive will have an important relief on Millbrae Avenue, because it will take traffic that today goes all the way to Murchison, for example, or to Truesdale, to get on California Drive, and there is a lot of traffic that does that. They'll be able to use this as access, either coming from Burlingame or going to Burlingame without crossing Millbrae Avenue. And so that's an important contribution that the project makes to traffic as a mitigation.
Right. I would say that for a complete project, we need to work, not to put too much on the city, but we need to have these improvements done, as in time as this is constructed, so that
we've
it
been
all works.
only asking for this for the last 6 years. Okay.
So one more time, as Brad mentioned earlier, this stuff has been already worked out earlier, much earlier. We're on to architecture now. So we're going to set this aside for now, okay?
I just need to say, I think we have some additional conversations to go, because what the applicant stated isn't exactly my understanding. We are working on a reimbursement ordinance to cover the costs of the preparation of the specific plan. That's my understanding. There are terms in terms of the roadways and improvements that are in the development agreement. We can go over those with the applicant, but it's not, you're right, it's not really the subject of tonight's meeting.
Okay, can you, if you can go to page 51. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Fung, did you have something?
I do.
Based on, okay. On 51, the R1 Gateway Corner. And if, okay, so yes, so this is going toward the right. That's El Camino. Going in is California, and if you look at it on the upper floors, there you have the floor to ceiling windows, and you can actually see people. I know it's a rendering, but you can actually see people there. And I think you mentioned, or someone mentioned that. That's changed, right? Okay, so I just want to confirm. So that's not. This is difficult when there are changes and we get renderings. So that's what I wanted to confirm, is that that's not what it's going to look like, right?
That's not the way it's going to look.
Okay.
We have the balconies are intended to screen the what's going on in the interior. This was an issue that came up at I think with you folks and with the
City Council.
Mm-hmm. And so they didn't like the wall to be. The sense was that the council didn't like the wall going up, and they were worried about the same question about looking into the units, and the balconies on El Camino help screen because it'll be an opaque kind of a glass balcony frontage, so you can't really look into the unit or see clearly out of the unit.
Right, so that's why I just wanted to confirm that
rendering.
all, okay.
Unfortunately, each of these drawings costs thousands of dollars to produce, okay? And so we with staff, we selected which drawings staff wanted us to present and make changes, and we made the changes on those. Mm-hmm. And some of these were done before, and they show something about the project that's still important to see, but they are not directly relevant to the new colors and new changes.
Okay, that's good. I just wanted to confirm it. Again, I can only go with what I have in front of me, so thank you for clarifying that. And I did want to just put in there, and I'm sure everybody else feels the same, but just a thanks to really the neighbors in the Hemlock neighborhood. I know there's a lot of pain that you've had to go through, and probably will be, that the rest of us living in Millbrae don't necessarily have to go through on a day-to-day basis, but really appreciate that, and working with the developer as well, and all the work that the staff has put in to doing this. And I think just keeping that visibility inside and out, I think, is really important. So I know that this is partly why I guess we're asking for a continuation, is because we don't have all the plans, all the details. There have been a lot of changes along the way. Having said that, I do want to, if I can shift a little to signage, questions about signage and artwork. We do have a lot of different things here, that different examples, but it's not clear to me like what is actually set. I mean, do we just approve a concept, or are we planning to have more specific artwork and signage and all of that by next week?
So you're being asked to approve the locations for the artwork and the general indication of the type of the artwork. The artwork itself is not created yet. Mm-hmm. In terms of the signage, you are being asked to approve the signage typologies. Standing signs like the one on the screen in front of you. Monument signs, directional signs. These are the signs that have been proposed.
Can you, which page can you?
Page 24. Page 32. Well, not on this. No, 33. These are directional signage. So basically, these are monuments with directional signage. So you're seeing the proposed design and scale, and then examples of similar relevant examples in streetscape. Page 34, building signage, directory signage, building numbering signage.
Some of the signs are associated with the residential buildings. Some of the signs are associated with the commercial building. And so there are two sets of signs. We had like 3 different types of signs, and staff felt that in each case these were preferable, and so we've only shown the one of each type that goes with that particular type, either residential or office use.
Okay, thank you. I'll stop for now. So.
Where would the Welcome to Millbrae sign be placed?
The Welcome to Millbrae sign is placed here.
Galleria?
Yes, right off, coming off the BART Caltrain station of the Galleria.
What is the size? Oops. The size of those signs?
It depends upon where they are, whether they're a building sign or monument sign. The Welcome to Millbrae signs are approximately, let's see.
Because when you look at the rendering, they look a little on the small side.
Yeah. No, but there's a specific scale example of it. Here you go. Yeah. So they're several feet tall. Yeah, probably not quite 4. Several feet.
For many of the renderings for the retail spaces, I guess there's a lot of graphics, and then they don't really have the descriptions of the retail signage like the commercial businesses or restaurants and so forth.
No, because they're not identified yet as tenants. So when they would be, but they would follow the prescriptions for the signage for the building typology. So as Vince was saying, there's specific signage for the commercial building, specific signage for the residential buildings.
So we would envision that for the bottom floor Galleria, if you go back to the Galleria space here, even there, would there be more like commercial signs for restaurants and businesses?
Yeah, interior there would be. Inside the Galleria.
But my understanding is that Millbrae has as its sign ordinance that if you do a sign, you have to come through and get approval for the sign. I mean, it's a separate. It depends. If it was Starbucks, for example, they would come in and they would ask to have their sign, their typology sign approved, and then the council or the planning commission would decide if that's what they wanted to have for that retail use. So it's a little hard for us to be able to give you retail signage because it varies with who they are.
Right, I'm just trying to envision, how much commercialization there is, because right now it looks more, like office buildings, but I envision with all the retail space, there's going to be a lot more commercialization and signs.
Mine could be a little lengthy. So I need to go into a little bit more detail on the next go-round on a 45-degree cutoff plane, as we discussed a little earlier, as I would actually challenge you to step back the building in such a way that would not require us to amend the MSASP. In general, we have a general plan developed, the MSASP plan, and it's designed to be sort of a guideline for all developments within the entire TOD zones. So I'm not a huge fan of making exceptions so that we can build more units just because of that. Now, the argument that I have been hearing throughout the months leading up to this is that it's difficult for you to waterproof a sort of a terraced architectural building, right? And then we heard the same thing again today. But then there is plenty of balconies between story 1 to story 6 that has side balconies that actually open up to the sky and that would require you to do waterproofing. And that didn't seem like an issue for you. So I would say if this building is set back far enough, then there wouldn't be a need to sort of for us to change the MSASP so that it doesn't become any project that comes along. And then if they don't fit within the guideline, then, well, let's not change the project. Let's just change the guideline. You see what I'm getting at?
So, one of the things we should probably be clear about so that we're helping you help make decisions is I'm Paul Wolford. I'm the architect for the commercial office building and for the overall development plan, including signage, streetscape, entry, circulation, utilities, and everything else. Bill Higgins is the architect for the residential buildings. And so I'm going to ask Bill to respond to any specific design questions about the residential architecture.
Thank you. Yeah, so there are more complications when you think about stepping back each floor. It's not just waterproofing because you're having deck over another unit, which is its own challenge. It's structural where you're working with a mixed-use building that has a structural concrete frame system, and you can cantilever out maybe 5, 6, 7 feet. You can step back, but when you do it every floor, you're adding more columns, which add not just cost, but just interfere with the unit layouts. I mean, it just complicates the building. The design intent is being met. And we think it in a more elegant way than if you step back every floor. And I think at one meeting, and I don't know if it was Brad or Harry, you had a diagram of a building on the peninsula that stepped back every floor, and it was a building you would not want to see in Millbrae and embrace what you're trying to do here. We just feel that there's just structural complications, there's waterproofing issues, and the 45 degree is it's a line, but we think we satisfy the design intent to suggest, quite frankly, that if you set the entire building back to fit under a 45 degree plane, you're looking at setting back the entire building like 50 feet, which is a very onerous request. So that's why we feel we're meeting the intent by building within the proximity of that envelope, and we think it's a much more elegant design by doing it that way.
The way I look at this from my desk here is that if every project that comes along and says, well, it's not going to be an elegant design based on if you ask us to meet all the code requirement, then let's just change the code. I don't think that's going to be quite functional as a city for us to keep granting these exceptions and changing our code on the fly for every project that comes along.
I understand that, and we interpret this more as a guideline, and if it's something, obviously it's in the specific plan as a guideline. Like other guidelines, there were some elements in the specific plan that allowed for a 10% adjustment. We're beyond that by 15%, not 10%, but again, it's the design intent, which at the end of the day, I think you as a city want to have a building that you can be proud of as well. And, again, it's not a code issue. It's more a guideline issue. This building will satisfy all building codes that are necessary to get a building permit.
So, Commissioner Fong, there is one thing, having worked on the overall master plan. So the area plan is actually form-based zoning guidelines. It talks about bulk, height, mass, setbacks. The specific reference to the 45-degree angle was one to, frankly, be mindful of the neighborhood so that there weren't buildings of 10 stories, because the area plan is encouraging dense locational development right here, next to transit. So the intent of that is to create something in which the mass of the building steps back. I think there's examples right here. that start to talk about that. Your 3Ds, I'm trying to think, are they up here a little bit?
We don't have one from that direction.
You don't have so it would be helpful. So when we come back, we'll share one with you from that direction. So we were asked by the city council and by the city to do a peer review of the work of Architects International. So we did that, and I've actually written it and presented it, and Brad and Harry and the city staff will have that. One of the things that you can see in the architecture of the design is if you look at what this does, one of the things that we advised is in the prior design where everything was kind of glass and white metal, there was a certain lack of distinguishment from the ground all the way to the 10th floor. We said what people often are looking for in residential architecture is a sense of scale of place, that the ground floor podium, the 2 stories at the ground, are something that anchor the building to the ground and engage it in a public and welcoming way. And the middle part of the building is where you want that sense of kind of solidity with punch, so you sense a sort of a hole, but you also know that it's a residential, not an office building next door. One of the things we also recommended was shifting the material palette from white metal to something that was warmer, and AI has done that and has proposed using a true terracotta panel, which is actually a kind of clay panel that's baked and will actually look handsome for years. The top of the building,
a little bit later, but
the top of the building, we suggested that they lighten up. And it's at that point over here on California, looking over the Hemlock neighborhood, where they took that tripartite massing, base, middle, top, and took the top and slid the top back so that when you're in the Hemlock neighborhood, what you're not having is a direct sight line of the mass above. So the area plan gives the authority to you and to the city council to make discretionary adjustments within 10%. So it's not really a prescriptive thing. What does exactly 10% mean? It means you have the discretion of a contingency to allow for adjustments as long as they're following the intent of the plan. And so as an urban designer and architect, I think that what Architects International has done is follow it. Literally no to the 45 degree, but to the intent of the plan in which you have discretion, I do believe you have the authority, and it meets that.
And in order for...
I'm prepared to share that so you actually see that exactly.
Yeah, and in order for us to exercise that discretion, and it's a very serious discretion, that's why we were advocating earlier that we need to see something like this that shows exactly how much discretion are we granting, and how these non-compliance would exacerbate the problem that we perceive as coming outside of that 45-degree plane.
That's completely fair, and we'll come prepared to walk through that in great detail next time. Bill will walk through.
Okay, so that's number one. Number two, I'd like to identify and demonstrate, if you can help me, all the commercial elements on building R1 and R2 on the ground floor, particularly along the California Drive. Because from my review of the plan, and I think I've been advocating that since the beginning of this process, is that we're not seeing much of an active storefront along the California Drive, and leave.
I got to tell you, look, that's been decided. I call on the city attorney and I call on the planners. This has been decided. What square footage we are to provide for commercial, residential, and office, it was decided. We're talking about design. You're asking questions about providing more commercial. We can't do that. Okay, that's not part of design review. It's unfair to us. We've gone through that. Okay, I know. I would love to create, to have jewelry stores all over the place that bring great retail income to Millbrae. I'd love to do that. This project doesn't do that. It can't do that. And we've crossed that bridge. We've made even the retail that we've provided. I'm concerned that there isn't anybody going to come rent it. Okay, I mean that's the reality, and we're at $400 and $500 a square foot. to build it and to have nobody come rent it doesn't do Millbrae any good, doesn't do the project any good. So, we've got to get off this retail. I mean, it is what it is. If you have a problem with our storefront, you have a problem with, the signage, go for it. But we're not adding any more retail, just so we're clear.
I had a question. I seem to recall, wasn't there some flexibility in the ground floor? Yeah. You might want to mention that.
Yeah. So one of the things maybe we could do is just, I think often when people ask about retail, what you're asking the public generally is asking, are there active uses on the ground that it doesn't feel like it's a cold wall, that it's not welcoming, inviting? Is that a fair assessment?
That would certainly be a good part of it, yes.
And so let's just walk through the plan and talk about where those occur. So those occur specifically along the entire frontage of Camino, returning onto California here. I'm going to use the cursor to walk through that. So this entire space is retail. Mm-hmm. So it returns onto the passage back into the site and on California. Conversely, this is the lobby and reception. This is an active space, so it's not a dedicated private residential space. Also active space in lobby and health club. So this is a kind of, again, active anchor, active anchor, active anchor. These are live-work units, which are designed to address like townhomes to the street, so that they have the ability to activate and energize the street. And then this is the Galleria with retail and lobby and retail fronting the entire street, so on Linden. So those are where, the active uses for the development have occurred. Could this all be development that's commercial? Yes, because it's zoned as a commercial building. So it's ultimately how the market will demand how much of it is. This is dedicated retail. So there are key dedicated retail zones here, here, and here, and key active use zones here, here, and here. And then key zones that are zoned for live, work, commercial, and that's here.
As well as here.
Oh, there too.
And as well as on R1. So about you would recommend this is about I would say about 70% of R1 is wrapped with some active use, and the frontage of Sierra is lined with active use along the entire frontage.
So I think the intent is that where people are largely walking in a pedestrian way, there's active uses, whether they're dedicated pure retail or they're active uses that are commercial or,
And the one other thing to clarify is that as we move down California, the road drops from about roughly plus 21 to around plus 13 or 14. So there's like a 7-foot drop. So when you get to this corner, these units are at like plus 18. The road is at like plus 14. So their floor, they're standing on a floor that's 4 feet above the street. So there's no intent that this be an active side. It's more of we have loading dock and other transportation issues here. So we feel this is a very comfortable relationship to be 4 feet above a street that has more vehicles, and you're protected both visually. So we think the zoning is correct relative to where the pedestrians are going to be and how you want to draw people through the site.
One of my major concerns is that, especially on California Drive, right around the bend, that's sort of on the left-hand side, the left-hand corner up there, that bend, they're all going to be loading docks, and that you said that they're going to be 4 feet above the street level.
So just so that we're clear, the loading dock itself is back.
Right there.
Yeah, I'm going to show the plan for those uses. Yeah. So the loading dock is...
What's the middle of the R2 building on California?
Right here. So it's, 100 and something feet away from the intersection at the corner.
Right.
And it's tucked into the building.
Okay. And then to the left of that, are they...
To the left of that is actually residential units, and then this is the access to the parking, subterranean parking. So you'll go in and drive down.
Yeah. My concern is that, with this big frontage on a sort of a public street, when there's no active uses of that storefront, as you describe it, it could become sort of a blight later on, where people could become a dumping ground, could be an attraction for homelessness, that sort of thing, along California Drive, especially on the other side of the street. That could be a real issue.
other side is empty.
It's what? I know, but then there's just no active use on that street, and it could become a real issue down the road from a security, and I just hate that to become a dumping ground later on.
Well, the developer and whoever is owning the buildings will be actually committing to a building, basically a campus maintenance plan, in which there'll be security, there'll be cleaning programs. There's actually a view of that.
Yeah, I remember seeing that.
Here. So I think if you take a look at this view, even though the residential units are sitting up here, they actually have direct eyes on the street. So we're not talking about a windowless, multi-100-foot-long wall. We're talking about a building that has, for the residential building, that has units and windows looking at the street all along. And for the office building, basically it's opening at the street level at the ground floor plan as well for the ground floor, commercial uses. So in terms of that being a concern, when we develop the plan, working with the developer and the other architects, I don't think that that's going to be that should not be a problem because of the way that the site is laid out. It's not a back corridor. It's a primary corridor for all transit, the buses, automobile vehicles, and bicycles and pedestrian routes. So it's going to be a complete 180-degree turn from what it is today.
I mean, it'll get the same treatment in terms of landscape, street trees, street lighting, the signage, the pedestrian signage, the wayfinding signage. So it's not going to be considered the back door. It's just another edge to the property. Yeah.
And this through-block passage right here, which has public art in it, and which the commercial and the retail, the residential building open onto at the ends as well, is, it was very thoughtfully designed to not allow this to be a back door.
So on page 61, which shows sort of that particular bend on California Drive. Yep. Yep, that's it. How is that lighting going to look like in the nighttime?
Well, the night lighting is still somewhat to be determined because in residential design, you don't want to have light into the units, so you got to be very careful. It's different than maybe an office building. Right. So we would probably light some of these edges, just in terms of a glow on some of these solid edges. But there'll be street lighting. This doesn't show the full streetscape, but there'll be street lighting as per our street lighting plan. These street trees will continue down the street, and
because I just imagine if I have to walk through that area, 10 o'clock at night, what is my pedestrian experience going to be?
Have you ever walked by the BART station at night?
Microphone.
Have you ever walked by the BART station at night?
Sort of after dawn. After dusk.
After dark, the BART station is more lit up than San Francisco International Airport. Go there tonight after the meeting and take a look. The problem is lighting. The reason why the apartments are put where they are and why the office is put where it is because of the lighting of the BART station. That whole facade, that whole street, there is no problem with illumination. As a matter of fact, it's too much. And if you go there at night, you'll see what I mean.
So from these buildings, on the street level, from the sidewalk level, you can see directly into the tracks?
Yes.
But you don't have any dividers between the tracks and the pedestrian walkway?
No.
There's a security fence.
Oh, yeah, today there's a fence. But where the fence is today is going to be the street, and then 50 feet away from the tracks is the building.
So there's no trees and landscaping that sort of separate and divide.
Today there's none.
No, I know today there isn't, but upon this completion, is there no trees or shrubs or?
You can see you can see them there. They're street trees. They're not. It's not a hedge or obstruction.
It's page 22. So
So there's trees against the property line, not on the other side of the street, adjacent to the BART station, because that's the BART land.
There's no trees on Bart's side.
But you can see the street lighting on both sides. You can see it here in the rendering.
So on page 22, those lightings.
Yeah.
Right.
So on page 22, the actual rendering that shows the street lights, are those going to be the actual features upon completion? Or is it already there?
Bart. Those are Bart's lights.
Are they already existing? No.
No.
Because the sidewalk and the curbs and everything will be new.
We have to build the curbs and whatever on the Bart side.
But those lights will be, you're saying that those lights will be done by BART? Or is it you?
It's whatever Bart wants. Okay. It's their standard, yeah.
Okay, so I guess what I'm hearing is they need to be new lighting. There will be new lighting. We don't know what they're going to look like, but BART will mandate how you're going to do it. Is it you going to be doing it, or is it going to be BART doing it?
It's what they tell. I don't know. I mean, we offered to do it, but they may want to do it or have their contractor do it and bill us for it. I don't know how that's going to work.
So as part of the design review, we should probably know what they're going to look like, right?
Well, you're asking us to define what a public agency is going to, another public agency is going to require.
Does it fall on BART's property?
Yes, that's BART's property.
So there's no arrangement yet, as I'm hearing it now, that between you and BART as to who's going to do it and how it's going to get done. Correct. That's what I'm hearing.
We've offered to do it, but it's their call as to how it's done. Life in the real world. This is life in the real world. It's not what you like.
This is the issue that we're pointing out again with the complete project. And as I was mentioning before, it'd be great if we were able to comment on the development of California Drive and the BART station. And just the rendering right here, I know that it's just a concept drawing for page 61. If you go over to page 61.
Right, also page 61 as well.
Yeah.
Along page 61, along California Drive, that sort of intersect with El Camino.
So there's a lot of issues.
Doesn't look like there's any lighting on that as well.
Yeah, there's be a lot of issues like the landscaping against the big retaining
There's lighting
wall.
on the California Drive on that side. There is lighting.
We have a lighting plan.
Yeah. That is along the streetscape on 61?
It's not reflected here in the rendering, but there'll be an entire lighting program along the street for street illumination.
Can we get some clarification on that before Monday?
There is a lighting plan laid in your drawings. I believe there is a lighting plan. You have it.
Would you mind pointing to it?
I don't know if it's...
Well, once again, across the street is not what we're dealing with, is it?
Yeah, it's one of the first ones.
Yeah. Before we move on, though, I did want to point out that your question, Commissioner Fong, about the activation of the street, these are all residential units.
Right.
And the windows are going down to 4 feet above the curb. So to the point about the question of just sort of eyes on the street, there'll be units looking out onto the sidewalk, just above the sidewalk level, the entire length of California, on both ends of California. Okay. So it will not be a blank wall.
And, excuse me. There's also going to be a bike path there, isn't there?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, it's a
Both
big
sides.
street.
Sorry?
It's a large street. I mean, coming out into El Camino, it's 49 feet, right?
Wide, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, that's the issue, too, is that, is there a way we can work with BART to help develop that side? Because if we just develop one side of the street and the other side of the street's not developed, it's not a complete project. And the way they have it with 61, there's an enormous, sidewalk there that I can envision being a big tent city for homeless people.
Oh, my goodness.
And, we need to develop it and think about these issues.
First of all, you said that there's a lighting plan?
Security.
Yeah.
Where is it?
Oh, come
I mean, it's going to happen. You know how.
Roland Haga with BKF Engineers.
Sorry, one conversation at a time. Sorry.
Just Roland Haga with BKF Engineers, and we've been working with Caltrain on an encroachment permit. That whole side of California does have lights. It's the Caltrain platform.
You're saying the Caltrain side of it?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a platform. There's no access to it now because the street ends. It's a service area. When this street goes through, it matches those improvements. So on the other side of California will be a full platform to Caltrain.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. What about
the only way we can do this is to ask for an encroachment permit, which we're working with them right now on.
It just shows.
Yeah.
Well, that's not the street lighting. Right. There's a
No, but there is lighting on the BART, what we call the Caltrain BART side. There is current lighting because there's a platform there. So I just want to make it clear that...
So the platform has lighting?
Yes.
That's what you're saying?
The platform on the east side of California Drive will be the limitations of the platform to the Caltrain.
Is there a great difference?
And extended all the way down to the corner of where Caltrain.
So if it hasn't been accessed and it's not being utilized right now, again, we need to, work, or the city, I would suggest we need to work with, Caltrain, BART, to understand how it's going to be developed. I mean, is it a safety issue? Are people going to be able to wander right on the tracks and be hit by Caltrain?
I think there's safety guardrail, right?
Just something, just so that we can put this in perspective, just to be mindful of. These are questions that are fair and valid questions for a community. They're just beyond the scope of this project. So they're really beyond the property boundary lines. And so they're not part of the purview. We can coordinate, the developer has offered to coordinate, but in terms of purview, it's not part of this scope for this development team nor this commission, because it's really beyond the purview of this particular project. It's important things to coordinate with the city, but it's beyond the boundaries of the project.
So, question for staff, if I can. So along California Drive on the Caltrain side, as well as after the bend going up to El Camino Real, on the public side of the street, who has the responsibility to develop it?
I'm sorry, you're talking about on California Drive?
Correct.
On the east side of California Drive?
East side and north side.
Right, so on the east side, that's BART property.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you look at page 23, I think that kind of gives you a much clearer understanding of what's going on in the interaction between the building and BART. Do you see that cross section?
Yes.
Okay.
The place where it
right.
been notated as clear space.
Correct.
At 22 feet, right. And the bike length 5 feet.
If what the issue here is illumination of California Drive, then I think probably the best thing that we can do is have a condition that would encourage the cooperation to the extent feasible between BART and the city to try to incorporate, appropriate pedestrian lighting. Now, on this platform, I assume BART's going to have their lighting plan. We need to understand what that is. Mm-hmm. So I think that's how we could potentially resolve that issue. That city works with the BART to understand what that lighting plan is, and to the extent that it, can have a benefit to the project, then we can do that.
What about after the bend? After it goes on California Drive, goes up to El Camino Real, neighboring the Hemlock side?
So that's where the landscape wall is going to be running the entire length. So the
Correct.
public will be not directed to walk on the, if you will, the Hemlock side of the California Drive. They'll be walking on this development side.
Yes.
Sidewalk, street lighting, plantings, street.
Right, because on 61, I don't see any lighting at all. But you said that there's a lighting plan, but there isn't there yet.
So Roland, when we come back next Monday, it sounds like there's a real interest and a concern to have complete lighting plan shared, right, with these guys to show where street lighting will be.
I think we have a lighting plan in package, but all the lighting is on the project side.
Right.
It casts lights onto the roadway, but not into the residential area.
I just wanted you to understand my perspective here, because if I'm looking at this,
yes,
if I'm walking down California Drive, taking the turn on the bend late at night, I'll be a little concerned.
Well, there'll be lighting there. It'll be lit up to public standards.
Well, I think I'd like to see what it's going to be, right? As I walk down this path.
No. I have a question.
If you walk down here, I don't see any lighting at all.
Is there a sidewalk on both sides of the street? Yes.
There's sidewalk on both sides. Yes.
Okay. And will there be streetlights on both sides of the street?
Streetlights on the project side for the street.
Side.
If there's requirement for pedestrian lighting on the other side, that'll be a requirement of the light.
Okay. Go ahead.
If I'm not mistaken, the street does not belong to this project, does it? Yes, it does. The whole California Drive is yours?
The California Drive from El Camino to Linden.
Microphone. Sorry, Vince. Could you give him the mic?
One person at a time. Sorry.
Just to clarify, the portion of California Drive from El Camino to this corner that we're talking about is on Vincent's property. He has an obligation to grant a right-of-way easement for the city and public use. The right-of-way along the frontage of Vincent's property, along California Drive and the project, there's varying amounts of right-of-way easements that's being granted to the public to facilitate the construction of California Drive. 60 feet of the right-of-way east of this is under control of Caltrain and BART. So it's a combination of putting public improvements in a combination along this right-of-way. The portion of California Drive that's being constructed by this project is from El Camino, California Drive to the 90-degree turn, all the way to Linden, is going to be constructed as part of this project.
Through the chair, I think that once they develop their lighting plan, I think that's going to give us some understanding of how that's scaled to the pedestrian along the building. So I don't know if there's an idea of doing kind of lighting bollards along the sidewalk, or if there are wall sconces that would be on the wall, something of that nature, just to sort of help light up that sidewalk along California Extension. But I think we just need to see those details.
I would add just the big component of these architectural plans is just thinking about security and safety and, preventing hidden areas for, people to hang out or occupy space in camp. So it kind of goes along with just building a nicer, safer neighborhood.
So just want to remember that we're going to have the complete plans next week, that these are renderings. He's coming to the microphone.
My name is Sal Originello. I'm the project manager for Vince Musi on this project. The complete plan you're going to get are a lot of the infills that you've asked for, but to come up with a lighting plan for next week is impossible. It's very technical. It's very, in putting it together. We have committed to putting lighting as according to the city ordinances to require lighting. You can be guaranteed it'll be a heck of a lot better lighting than you have right now on Magnolia. If you try walking on that, you'll kill yourself. The lighting is going to be done per code all the way around. The rendering doesn't show all the lighting. Obviously, we're going to have lighting along that thoroughfare.
In design review, what we understood you were looking for, and as part of design, is what sort of a light standard are you going to provide? If you're going to provide sconces, what are they going to look like? As far as locationally, it's going to be based on what your ordinances require. So if you have to have it every 50 feet, lighting every 50, we have lighting every 50 feet. But we're not proposing, at a certain point you get into, not planning, but project building permit stuff. And so, tell us, we'll show you various light standards or lighting systems, but to say that the light's going to be at every 50 feet or 25 feet, it's whatever the code requires. And that's what we'll provide.
So, staff, Mr. Meisner, so you're going to craft a condition that would take care of that as we're directing?
Yeah, so as they were talking about what the code mandates, I was simultaneously
Trying to look at
to figure out exactly where that stands. So, there are a couple of approaches we could take. Certainly, we could have a condition of approval that says that they shall be compliant with all of our standards for lighting. We can do that. I need to understand what those are. But then also, I do think from a design review perspective, we should have an idea of what type of lighting fixtures they are going to incorporate in the project. So if they can bring that back, we'd appreciate those design standards for lighting, and then we'll have to understand where they'd have to be implemented by city ordinance.
And then the other condition would be that for the two of them, private and public with BART and Caltrain, that they work together to get a good design for the, for the east side of the street.
Right. Yeah, and I think I alluded to that earlier. I think what we're able to do in that regard is just to have an encouragement of all parties working together to come up with a solution.
And I personally, I would feel very comfortable them working with staff. I think it's probably a little bit more than what our expertise is.
So on the next go round, if you can come back with some lighting plan on your rendering, that would be appreciated.
I think we're getting...
Okay, what we will show you...
Microphone, please, Vince.
We'll show you lighting type fixtures that we would be proposing for various locations based on what the ordinances require and what the building permit requires. I mean, we will, but as far as putting them on drawings, it sounds like a detail, but to do it is very time consuming and not easy. And it may not reflect what ends up. I mean, it would be, again, all we would be doing would be giving you something that's representational and not something that necessarily is how it would play out in the field because of the complexity of setting up a lighting program.
What we can do, though, is to take a site plan and just show where the street lighting will be, like the zones of where it would be. So we could just take and show the band of where street lighting would be anticipated.
That would be a good start, yep.
Yeah. And then we have already incidental lighting here in kind of the passages. So we could do that. Because to Vince's point, we don't know exactly where every street standard will be because that's actually very detailed curb, sidewalk work. And we haven't gotten to that level of design yet.
I mean, I guess we're not trying to count how many lights you're going to have on California Drive on your rendering and try to make sure that when you build it that you actually have 15. Let's say you have it on 15 on the rendering here. I guess what we're trying to say is, what the pedestrian experience is going to be walking through that California Drive late at night, right? I think that would be an important part for us to try to, I don't want to use the word scrutinize, but we need to know what it's going to be if you're asking us to approve it.
So what we can do is we can provide a plan that shows where the zones of safety, public safety illumination will go so that you can understand and then you can feel comfortable saying to the public, this is where public safety illumination will go so that, the sidewalks are safe. And
actually, can we turn to page 55? So there is those thoroughfares that go between the buildings. So is the idea to encourage and make it more attractive that people will want to walk through between the buildings rather than walking around behind the building?
Well, the intent is to break the scale of the blocks down so that these cross-block passages here are attractive and interesting places for people to walk through, yeah.
So if that's the primary path that we would expect people to walk, that would be even better than walking behind a building with a lot of parking cars going in and out of garages.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I mean, if you look at the pedestrian circulation, I would just do that anyway because it's shorter. So you're just cutting through the complex. So that would make more sense, and it would be more active to begin with. So I would expect that's probably what would happen.
Does anybody have any more questions that won't be better addressed when we have a complete packet in front of us next week?
I got one more.
Okay.
I have one too.
Okay. I understand we talked a little bit more about commercial space a little earlier. But if you look at page 27, which is what your galleria is, and you mentioned earlier that it's likely to become a giant lobby for your commercial building.
Well,
Vince said that. So what I want to clarify is the Galleria is intended to feel like a public realm space. That's why there's 2 retail outlets on there. If it were a typical corporate lobby, there would be no retail in it.
Right.
So by the virtue of putting the public art in the space and the retail in the space and keeping it open during BART hours is to keep this as something that feels more like a public realm space than a private space. Can the tenant of the building do branding in here for themselves? Yes, of course. But there's also going to be, frankly, there's dedicated retail spaces anchoring the entire length of the Galleria.
What I was going to say was, by looking at this, and I'm imagining I'm walking out of Caltrain, looking at this building, it looks like a perfect spot for an Apple Store-like tenant, for example. I mean, it has such a great frontage and has...
Your lips to God's ear.
It is. I'm glad you like it. I mean, the reality is this not only is a major pedestrian thoroughfare, but if you just sit on either BART or Caltrain and just sort of taking BART or Caltrain every day, you're going to see this, right? I mean, there's so much commercial opportunity for this, retail opportunity for this, that just leaving it as a giant lobby space would be, I guess I'm sitting at my desk, I'm trying to figure out what are the best way to serve the city better. And I think, if we can get some tax revenue out of this, it would be great. At the same time, it is such a huge commercial opportunity that I hate to go to waste.
Here. So the intent is...
I'm looking at this, it looks like just a grocery place. I mean, it could be a giant Apple Store-like retail space.
Well, it's commercial.
Yes.
So, and it's dedicated retail. So really it is, again, what the market will bear. But the intent is to have public serving commercial retail spaces here with the reception and the lobby sort of for the building tucked back in here. And this to feel very much like a public open space. Hence the idea of the amphitheater at the end. We've designed it to feel like a public space.
It is a public space.
Yeah.
It's open space. It's an enclosed plaza.
Right.
Yeah, that's what it is.
I mean, they meet open space requirement without this being open space to begin with, right? Is that correct?
No, we always propose this as a galleria to be open to the public, to be able to have them to have a place to stop and have a cup of coffee and to socialize, to create activity. There's nothing that prevents an Apple Store from locating where today you see the fruits and vegetables there.
Right.
It doesn't have to be that. It could be the entry to an Apple Store, which would have frontage on the on California Drive that would extend back, to at least to the delivery point in the building, and could have the whole back of the building. I mean, there's no limitation. I mean, other than the 5,000 square feet, there's another 20,000 square feet potentially of space that's available for those uses. When you have to take out the core and you have to take out the other elements. But
I'm sure you can make the floor plan works, right? I guess what I'm getting at is, yes, you mentioned earlier that there's a certain amount of commercial space and you meet those requirements, but those are the minimum requirements. I'm really hoping that this project would be a successful project for our city, both not just looking good and be a proud project that we can all call a nice project, but at the same time, it should also be commercially successful for us, as well as you, as well as a developer.
That is the goal. That's what we're going to all try to do. I mean, but you need to understand that the topography, the location and frontages that we have don't dictate that you can do a lot of successful commercial. I mean, it just doesn't. Yes, you have the BART station across the way, and there are people there for 4 hours in the morning and 4 hours in the evening. But businesses don't run split shifts. Okay, that isn't how the retail world works, and we have an ever shrinking retail world. I have 3 shopping centers. Let me tell you, I have very few tenants come in to me wanting to do what anybody would have thought was retail 20 years ago. Today, it's almost all food. That's what retail has become. And so it's just, if you kill Amazon, maybe retail would come back. But ain't nobody killing Amazon.
If I might, through the chair, I believe, Vince, in the last hearing with the council, there was a discussion with Councilmember Holliver about this space, and I thought there was an arrangement. So we've got the Galleria, we've got the two retail spaces, and then I think there was an understanding that if it was possible to rent the rest of that commercial space for retail, it would be done. But I think you had brought in a shopping center expert who was quite pessimistic about the potential for that. So I think that was sort of the compromise that was worked out in the last, right before the approval of the project, was to try to leave the remainder of the ground floor of the C1 building to have some availability, but it wasn't, absolute.
The way it's worded is that it's commercial with the right to a use permit for offices, so that somebody, we'd have to come in and demonstrate. We've tried to rent it for a year or 2 years, and we haven't had any takers. We have an office user that wants to use it. Can we get a use permit to use it for office?
Some sort of a conditional use permit then?
A conditional use permit. It's retail with a conditional use permit for offices available.
So it's permitted use as a retail space.
Right.
Conditional use permit required if they want to do offices later on.
On the ground floor, yes.
Is it the same for the live work on Sarah?
No, the live work is live work. They're all on Sarah. Those are all designated live work. It depends on what the occupant wants to do. I mean, if the guy's an attorney and he wants to live there and run his law office out of there, that's his call. If he's an insurance agent, he could do that too. If he's an artist, if he's a shoe cobbler, I mean, there are all sorts of 1 or 2 person type facilities that would take a live work position.
Okay.
Just in terms of color, I noticed that there is a pretty big redesign coming back, with the terracotta, the red, the yellowish looking.
That's what we've presented. There isn't more coming. I don't want to be clear. There isn't anything more coming back unless somebody tells us to do something more.
I understand that some of these coming from the direction of the council last time, that they want a more residential feel of the building.
That's what we did for you. We took what we heard from the council, made those modifications, and have presented those to you tonight as what the plan is today. That was our instruction of what to do from staff.
Okay, understand.
We tried to give you the whole picture. They told us not to do that.
I don't know about everybody else, but personally, I like the design that had been done previously. I think we live in a modern time, and these buildings are designed to be modern buildings. And I think,
I agree with you.
Yeah, I think
that's all for next week.
I mean, council overrides us.
So I don't. We're not here to do what the council does, right? We're here to do what we do. And then if we were to recommend certain things that we believe is the right design to be done for this project, then that's what we do. And if they call it up and they want to say something else, it's up to them. But from my perspective, sitting on the planning commission, I think the design that we had previously looks great.
I like the balconies, but I think we're going to have to be past all of that.
We do feel that the proposal of using the terracotta tile, it's a very contemporary material, but it also is something that actually feels warm because it's a natural masonry material.
Yeah, it is nice. Yeah, it's not like a, you mean this one, right?
Yeah, sorry, I have just a couple more.
Go ahead.
Actually, I like the more color. I didn't like it too white, so I kind of like having a little more warm colors to it, and I don't think the materials, from what I can tell, it doesn't seem to take it back, too much. So I think that looks, I mean, you got to look at the materials. I think it'll look.
It's going to look beautiful.
Hope so. Just to move on, I think Mr. Rodriguez mentioned about the Sarah Station sign kind of cornering El Camino. I thought that was a good point, which if you're coming from north, I mean, if you're heading south, it looks cool, it looks fine. But then if you're going from south going north, you just do see just the station. So.
This was actually a suggestion for that location. Obviously, the sign the sign designer was not available. It is possible to go back to the other version that had it vertical along this wall.
Just right on El Camino.
Like facing as you. The idea of this project was it's the gateway into Millbrae from the north, from San Bruno. So I mean, you're coming from along El Camino. Here's Millbrae. Welcome to Millbrae. This is the gateway. Coming the other way, you're already in Millbrae. You would almost want something similar at the Burlingame Inn. So
well, you're already in Millbrae here too. So even if you're coming from the north,
right? No, but
I just think it's good to have a.
What we were thinking was that the coming from the south, when this project is not the last project you're going to see at the station. Okay, and so the identity, I assume that where Peter's Cafe is, is going to give you the opportunity to make the identity going north. Okay, and so that was our thinking of why to do what we did on the south facing wall there. But I think we can still restore the vertical. I think the comment made earlier about going around the corner, I think is dead on, and I appreciate that. And I think we can, I've talked to the architect, they think they can fit a vertical that would not read sideways.
Okay, that's what I was going to say too.
Down, and would be possibly visible from both directions.
Both things. I think that would be better.
I agree. I think it got lost at the bottom. Yeah. It needs to be up high.
That's the other thing, is that it was really low down. So, and then the artwork on 53 for the Sarah Plaza. I know this is just an example, but I just personally would say I'm not feeling that artwork. So it's a little creepy to me. So I would just put that out there. Page 53, there's this white kind of octopus-looking thing. I'm sorry, I'm not an art major, so it might be something that, but I'm not feeling that design. I know we want to be contemporary, and I get that, and I'm not. But I think design-wise, it got okay.
So
it's got more than 8 legs.
So no public art has actually been designed or engaged.
Okay.
At the very beginning of the presentation, we have specific examples of different kinds that are proposed.
Right. And I'm making that comment because I'm assuming you're proposing different designs, and so you do want a little bit of feedback in terms of
what I would like to see there, but I don't know. We're not really able to find something that was appropriate. Is something that's more of a circle where people could sit. And there would be perhaps a water feature in the middle, or if a statue in the middle, but it would allow for seating around it. But there's all sorts of things that you could do, and we do have another water feature where the garage entrance is, and because of the slope, there's a slope there because it's the roof of entering the garage, and we intend to use that to create like a stepping waterfall type effect.
Right, and I like that. I think the circle, like there's one on page 14 that does have a little bit of a circle, and then I think it's a fountain where kids are like walking. I like something like that would be preferable, interactive, definitely.
The statues that you see, the one that I particularly like is the one with the children.
The mic.
There's one bronze statue with the children. Yeah, this number 15, and the top left one. I really love that, and if I could find a way to get that sort of thing done, it'd be I think it'd be nice.
Also like the dense foliage or the ground covering, something that's denser so that you're not afraid someone's hiding behind there or again camping out.
And done. Anything else?
One more for the Page 55, there's the walkway between the C1 and the R2 buildings. Just in terms of the privacy for the residents, was there some thought given to shielding any of the commercial building offices so they don't peer directly into the residents, or something could be done?
Well, actually, look at 56. There's more landscape edge that helps provide some visual privacy and screening.
I think Commissioner Wong is talking about up above. No, it's actually intended to be very much like any urban situation, which you're in an office building and you've got a neighbor next door, and it's either another office building or another residential building.
In page 56, there is some type of pattern on the commercial building. If there was something like a screen or something that would...
Yeah. Yes. So it is a visual screening on the glass, so it isn't just completely clear.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to, if you go to the airport...
Microphone.
At the international terminal, okay, above the international terminal, what we're talking about, when we're talking about fritted glass, it's there is a sample, I'm sure, but it's what you see above the terminal. It's like, it has like white, there it almost looks like snow, isn't it? It looks like snow, and this would be variegated on the facade so that it creates an obstruction, but it's still see-through. I mean, you can still look into the apartment across the way.
So I would suggest if there's any way to obscure that to give more privacy to the residents, might be good to consider.
Right. Most people call them blinds or drapes.
Yeah, but then people will have to keep their blinds closed all the time, so you know how it is. Okay. And then,
well, I mean, if you think about it, it's like any dense urban situation in which people live and work and shop and dine in the same place. So mostly the hours of the commercial building are going to be largely 9 to 5. And unless people are in the residential dwelling all day long, often people in residential dwellings, if they're workers, they're leaving, going to work and coming home in the evening. So the shifts often are different.
Okay. Last comment. I thought next to the Welcome to Millbrae sign would be good to have a welcoming placard or a plaque or something multilingual. I think that Millbrae, we've been pushing ourselves as characterized by intermodal transit hub, biggest one west of Mississippi. But I think one of the more key characteristics of our city is that we're next to the airport. We're kind of a welcoming for visitors from all parts of the world. So if there was a plaque next to it, just welcome in many different languages, I think that would be nice.
One of the things is the Millbrae sign sits on a kind of pedestal. It could be we raise the pedestal a little bit and we put the welcome in various languages.
Have it as a circulate, yeah.
That'd be great.
I think from a really long time ago, there's a motion on the table.
Did I ever say that?
I think you did.
I think that was yesterday.
Do we need to repeat it, or does anybody?
One quick comment.
Okay, one more comment.
Just one quick comment there.
Vince.
So, from a design review perspective, I'm looking at your Sarah Avenue rendering between page 58 and 59.
Okay, these did not have the colors changed to the...
I understand. What I was going to say to you was, if I had a choice, my recommendation is to do 58 instead of 59.
Well, it doesn't have the people in the cars.
Yeah, I mean, that's...
From a color, from a design, and also I particularly like the active storefront on 58. I mean, the 59, you mentioned live, work, and then how many of them are actually living versus working, I don't know. And it didn't seem like we have a control over that. I'm not a big fan of it.
Well, it's the unfortunate aspect of the different render. This is a professional rendering, and others an in-house drawing. It doesn't show that.
I'm sure you're all professional.
The dynamic.
3 weeks. It took 3 weeks to get number 58.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, I mean, it's a rendering technique that's different. Obviously, it would be the same storefront, the same active life, the same streetscape. It's just the only difference.
You have different colors.
Is the color. Yeah.
You have different colors, right? You have the terracotta on the 59.
Right.
And I'm saying I'm a bigger fan of 58 rather than 59.
So one thing about the terracotta is it's actually a material and it's a color. So some of the samples you can see up there are sort of kind of skewed to the lighter ochre color.
This one.
Actually, the one in front of Commissioner Fung right now, that's the more ochre. The one that's in there. No, the one that's in there.
Yeah. That's pretty much the color that you're seeing in 50.
Right, in the side, 58.
That's 58.
The problem with the colors on these
Microphone, please.
The problem with the colors on the renderings is that when you put them on the computer, it's not the same.
They don't look right.
But that's the color in 58. And
that's the color.
And the darker terracotta, you're right, is the color was suggested for 59.
59 is which one?
The darker one on the far left. No, the one on this board right there. Yes.
What it shows as terracotta 3 raw sienna.
It's not this one?
That's for R1.
That's R1.
We differentiated the two buildings. R1's a little lighter, R2's darker, and of course, when you see them in the sun, they'll be even, they also take on a different tone and hue.
So they're both terracotta. It's just that one is light tan sand, the other one is raw sienna.
Yes.
Yeah, light tan sand. Please.
There's. I think the call on the colors, if you guys can decide on which ones you want, indicate that in your preferences, or 1, 2, and 3, so that the council knows which ones you prefer. I mean, I think we're okay with what we've given you, and you just tell us what within that palette works best for you. And hopefully the council will agree with you.
Yeah, and I must say one thing, hopefully closing it out, is that the change from the all white and gray and glassy to more terracotta and something warmer came a lot, not just from the city council, but from the neighborhood. And I know a lot of them are no longer here, but I think it was an expression of concern about the building being too, institutional-like. And we listened, and we came back with something that has texture, has color, and the color range can change. But we think the terracotta is a great product. It's a very contemporary product, and we think it's preferable than trying to do like brick, which we don't think can also be contemporary, but can also be kind of old style. So we think terracotta, and there are many color hues you can see. You can go from a blonde color to a tan color to a taupe color. And we think those are all contemporary colors.
And when I look at 58, some of the columns on I don't remember, is it R1 or R2 building? The one that's closer to the picture where the Porsche is that R1 or R2 building?
Yeah.
R2 building?
Yeah.
Some of the columns don't have any terracotta on it. It seems like it's just stucco. Is that correct?
Well, no, we won't use stucco. We think that's a less quality material. It'd either be a stone tile.
Stone tile?
Yeah. Or like a porcelain tile, which is also one of the samples in that box. That's porcelain tile. Yes, this is porcelain tile. Terracotta. That's product. This is porcelain tile.
So based on 58's rendering, that's what you're using? Yeah, it seems to me that that's much better looking building than what's on 59.
Appreciate your.
Don't we have a Millbrae City Colors? And wasn't it like similar to the pattern on the street on Broadway? That there's the Millbrae pattern with the sun. I don't know. These kind of remind me a little bit about that, too.
That was more red. Yeah.
I make a motion.
Yeah. Do we need to rehear the motion? Or do I have a
I'm sorry. Can I just? So I think this we can just if we can have these next week, and then we can vote on it, and maybe have the two possibilities or something. I don't know if that works for an approval, but I feel like
I would recommend
at some point we
I would recommend that we come back with a preferred design and you evaluate it.
Okay.
All right.
So that means you want us to have a preferred design?
We will come back
You'll
with,
come out
we
your
heard you.
design. Okay.
AI will come back with a preferred palette so that we're not putting you in the position of having to pick colors or paint in a public realm. We heard you, and we'll come back with, I think the impression is that as opposed to skewing the building darker, what you'd like to do is warm it up, but keep it in a brighter, more ochre, taupe tones, as opposed to skewing it to the darker brick color terracotta.
Yeah, this does seem dark.
And so I think Bill heard that, and he'll come back with that revision.
Thank you. And I did have one more, which is the different, because I was staring at 50 and 59 and going back and forth. Also, you're going to have the pavers okay, so just wanted to clarify that because I understand it's just a render. I just, again, going back and forth, so want to make sure. I think that would help as well, so it makes a difference for the whole thing.
Can I bring back my motion to continue the public hearing to next
I
week?
just ask, though, that when we come back, if we could be the first item on the agenda. I've got 5 professionals that I have to hold here, and I don't want to hold them till 9 o'clock for, unless it's absolutely.
We were already planning on that.
Thank you.
So this is going to be continued to Monday night, March the 18th. Are we all in agreement here?
Are we voting? We have a second? What do we need here?
Sure, I'll second. Oh, you didn't motion. Sorry.
Motion, other one.
I did.
You did. Okay.
Oh, I didn't
not
push the button.
There you go.
Nothing's coming up.
There we go. Oh. There. Okay.
I'll second a motion to continue this hearing until March, is it 18?
Yes, it's the 18th. We're moving.
7 o'clock?
Votes, please.
Are we starting at 7? Yes.
Thank you very much.
Go for it. Passes 5-0. We'll see you next week.
I'm exhausted.
Okay. We don't have any new business. Do we have any staff updates?
No, that's hard to do.
Can we?
I know. Can we take the discussions outside, please?
Yeah. The only thing with staff update is just to remind everybody we have another special meeting this Thursday, March 14th, and so we'll see you all here at 7 o'clock.
And Mr. Meisner, if I may, I think the next meeting also some of the public also requested translation services Thursday. How would that be handled?
Right. So I have to give that some consideration about how we're going to deal with that. I'm hearing that the preference is to have the translation of the entire hearing broadcast. Okay. So then I need to work through that.
Yeah, I think prefer not.
Basically, it'll be a translation, but it won't be us, and then we wait for the translation.
So tonight was set up where we were trying to serve those that needed translation services, and we were going to do that in a very sort of in a group setting. It wasn't intended to be through the entire broadcast. If that's the preference, then we do have to think about how that occurs, whether or not that's a real-time translation or if that's where we'll all have to pause a moment and allow for the translator to catch up to the broadcast.
I think the preferred way to go, if I may suggest, is that we continue the meeting as we always do, rather than stopping, but the translator will translate in the background in the preferred languages being translated so that everybody on MCTV can choose whether they want to listen to the live discussion or...
I think there's more to it than that.
I think staff has to
translate it.
figure it out.
Yeah, but we prefer not to stop. Otherwise, this could be an 8-hour meeting.
I mean, and the other project is coming on second.
Coming this
Thursday.
Thursday, the 14th.
Thursday, but then what about on the 18th? What's
Same.
happening on the 18th? They're both coming on.
No. So on the 18th, what would occur is the continuation of tonight's hearing, as well as a consideration of specific plan amendment, and that would be it for the Sarah Station project.
So we're going to do the special meeting, but then we're going to do the special meeting for the BART project Thursday.
Thursday, correct.
But then it's not going to be on the 18th.
That's not the plan.
Okay. Thank you very much.
May I ask when we're going to be getting the packets for Thursday's meeting? What's the plan or the hope?
Once I leave here. No, the idea is that you'll have that packet tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Thursday's only a couple of days away.
Yeah, and it's hard to. We work too.
But
Thank
yeah,
you.
Mr. Meisner, I just want to make that clear that it is important that the commission discussion and the presentation do not stop for the translation, because if we do, this instead of a 4-hour meeting, it'll be an 8-hour meeting. So what I was going to say was the translation service must be done in concurrent as our discussion in the background, so that it does not disrupt the meeting. But the people who choose to listen to those translation services can and will be able to do that, either on TV or even live.
Staff is going to figure this all out for us. Staff will figure this all out for us. Okay?
I think we should just end with staff will figure it out, and
Staff will figure this out for us.
When did the city receive the packet for the Gateway next presentation? Is it just a presentation, or is it a whole packet for review?
For Thursday, it'll be a full staff report, findings, resolution, everything.
Is it a whole design packet submittal?
Yes.
And I would suggest that we need more than one day to review the packet.
Right, I'm trying to get it to you tomorrow for Thursday's meeting.
2 days. When did we receive the packet for the city?
So similar to what was going on with Mr. Muse's project, staff got the plans a little over a week ago, and we asked for a significant amount of changes, which is what led to the continuance from the 5th. So we're working as quickly as we can, and we will get that report out as soon as we can.
I would suggest that for any project, if everyone needs more time for review, it's not unreasonable to give 2-week turnaround period for comments, and then from the time that we receive it, even scheduling a meeting later for any project would be reasonable, so that we have more time for review. And we try to go through as much as we can, markups, everything takes time.
And I appreciate all your work. I know we're all working under some compressed time frame, so I appreciate that very much.
Any commission comments? Announcements?
I have my shredding party on April 20th at Mills High School, and e-waste recycling. So just kind of letting you know it's free and taking donations for Mills.
I'd like to thank those who came out to support Peninsula Chinese Business Association last Saturday. We raised quite a bit of money for the school district for their SEL program. I'm very proud of that, which is a great turnout. I'm very happy to, I'm very grateful to have all the support from all the commissioners as well as the staff to accomplish that. I think it's a true team effort.
All right.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming out to the public and giving us your feedback and comments. This is why we're here. We're serving the community and serving the people and trying to make our community a better place. And we need people's feedback.
And just one comment, I noticed at the Chinese New Year festival that there was some developers out there talking about their projects. So I'm not sure if other people got to see that, but that was a little bit surprising to see there. So yeah, that they were out there and already talking, and I'm like, which project is this? So anyway, just thought that was interesting.
Thank you, staff, for everything. Everything. We're adjourned.